Welcome wrestling enthusiasts and connoisseurs into a descent into the darkest, most disturbing corners of wrestling's biggest empire, WWE. This isn't just another list of scandals or retelling stories that you've heard 100 times before. This is the side of WWE they hoped you never discover, and once you go down this iceberg, there's no coming back. Conspiracies, predators, murders, real-life violence, backstage fights, shoots, forgotten tragedies, unreleased footage, sinister cover-ups, lawsuits, political power plays, banned storylines, erased superstars, and stories so twisted they never made air, and much more. You thought that you knew wrestling? Well, think again. This is the unknown WWE Iceberg. Disclaimer: this video is intended for mature audiences and is made for educational and documentary purposes. The entries discussed in this iceberg are meant to be thoroughly analyzed with the viewer's intuition and personal judgment. Viewer discretion is advised. And we're starting off at the tippity top of the iceberg, Tier 8. And to start off the iceberg, we have the Vince McMahon scandals. Despite being responsible for how popular wrestling is today, Vince McMahon is truly one of the most despicable human beings in the history of professional wrestling. From WWE's first female referee Rita Chatterton accusing him of R-word in 1986, to him SAing a tanning salon employee in 2006, and him doing the exact same thing in 2011 to a different tanning salon employee, to it being revealed in 2022 that he paid over $15 million to several different women for SAing them repeatedly over the years, all the way to 2024 with it being revealed that Vince trafficked a former WWE employee named Janelle Grant. The most recent accusation is especially damning because there's a plethora of evidence against him. The kicker in all of this is that this is just the stuff that we know that Vince has done, because Vince has paid so much in hush money that all of his deviant antics will likely never come to the light. All of this caused Vince McMahon to resign from the board of directors at WWE's parent company TKO, which means that now he essentially has no power in WWE. And up next we have Sullivan killed Chris Benoit conspiracy theory. One of the most chilling and persistent conspiracy theories surrounding the Benoit tragedy is the belief that Chris Benoit didn't actually take the lives of his wife, son, and himself, but instead their murder was orchestrated by Kevin Sullivan. Kevin Sullivan wasn't just any wrestler. He played a demonic, cult-like character in WCW, leading the Dungeon of Doom, a faction filled with supernatural overtones and satanic imagery. To some, it was just a gimmick, but others believe that Sullivan's ties to the occult were very real and he was an actual Satanist. Nancy and Kevin Sullivan's story is stranger than fiction. They were married while Sullivan, who was also a WCW booker, decided to script his wife into an on-screen affair with Chris Benoit. But what started as a storyline became real. Nancy fell for Benoit, left Sullivan, and later married Chris. Sullivan lost his wife to another man in front of the whole world, and Sullivan never remarried again. Despite Benoit publicly stating that he respected Sullivan's professionalism in the ring, their hatred for each other was undeniable. The day after Sullivan became WCW's head booker, Benoit abruptly defected to WWE, making it clear that he wanted nothing to do with Sullivan's leadership. Some say that Sullivan never forgave him. When Chris Benoit, Nancy, and their son Daniel were found dead in June of 2007, the case was immediately ruled as a murder-suicide. But something felt off, and one name kept surfacing in whispers: Kevin Sullivan. This theory suggests that Sullivan's ties to Satanism weren't just for show, and still harboring a hatred for Benoit, he orchestrated the killings in a ritualistic fashion, not only to eliminate Benoit, but to destroy his legacy forever. One piece of evidence that these theorists point to is the timeline of the murders. Nancy Benoit officially divorced Kevin in June of 1997, and exactly 10 years later, almost to the day, she was found dead in her home, along with Chris Benoit and Nancy and Chris's son Daniel. Was this a coincidence or a message? Sullivan has denied any involvement, and there's no concrete evidence linking him to the crime, but for those who believe in the darker forces behind wrestling, this theory refuses to die. And up next we have the Paige Leaks. Paige, now known as Saraya, is one of the most important women in WWE history, and she was one of the women who were an integral part of WWE breaking out of the Diva era. However, 2017 was not a good year for Paige. She had a nasty drug habit and was battling alcoholism. On top of that, her neck was giving out on her, causing her to have surgery on it. She was on the cusp of getting fired by WWE, and then everything got much worse for her as her private videos of her fornicating leaked. The sources of these videos was Paige's ex-boyfriend, Brad Maddox, who had taken all of these videos fornicating with Paige. Maddox claimed that he was hacked, but Paige believed that the leaked videos were part of some sort of plot of revenge. One of her colleagues in WWE, fellow wrestler Xavier Woods, was in one of the X-rated videos, where he and another unidentified man were taking turns doing it with Paige. All of this completely destroyed Paige as her hair started to fall out due to stress. She also developed anorexia and she fell into a deep depression, causing her to even contemplate taking her own life. Luckily, everything turned out fine for Paige, but those X-rated videos are still up and will forever haunt her because you can't delete something from the internet. And up next we have the Macho Man Randy Savage and Stephanie McMahon relationship conspiracy theory. The Macho Man was a two-time WWF champion and one of the most popular figures in WWE history. However, at the end of 1994, on an episode of Monday Night Raw, Vince McMahon abruptly announced that Randy Savage had left the company. The Macho Man jumped ship to WCW, but he never returned to WWE, even after the closure of WCW, and was barely acknowledged on WWE television at all until he passed away in 2011. And Savage's WWE Hall of Fame induction came about 4 years later in 2015. There was clearly some bad blood between Vince McMahon and Randy Savage, and many people attributed it to Vince taking it personally when Savage left for WCW. However, there's a conspiracy theory out there that says that the real reason for Savage's exit from WWE and the subsequent fallout with Vince was due to Savage having a not safe for work affair with Vince's daughter, Stephanie, when she was only 17 years old. This was after Savage had divorced Miss Elizabeth. The alleged affair with Stephanie lines up almost perfectly with the timing of Savage's departure from WWE. What added more fuel to the fire was when Triple H made disparaging comments about the Macho Man in 2004, and Savage responded by threatening to steal the game's girl, Stephanie. This theory persists as one of the longest standing conspiracy theories in all of wrestling. And up next we have the Montreal Screw Job was a work conspiracy theory. The Montreal Screw Job is one of the most controversial and infamous incidents in wrestling history. The plot by Vince McMahon to screw Bret Hart and prevent him from taking the WWE title to WCW has been talked about ad nauseum. However, there are several wrestling fans and even wrestlers like Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and Road Dogg who believe the Montreal Screw Job was one big work. This is mainly because everyone involved benefited massively from the ordeal. It garnered mainstream media attention for WWE, and Shawn Michaels was crowned WWF champion and became the unquestionable top heel in the company. Vince McMahon also became an on-screen character as the evil boss, which in turn allowed Stone Cold Steve Austin to become the biggest babyface in company history. And despite how things transpired, in the long term, Bret Hart secured a lucrative deal with WCW and left WWF as a sympathetic babyface, someone who could have been a huge success in WCW if booked properly. And up next we have the Ringboy Scandal. The WWE Ringboy Scandal refers to a controversy that unfolded in the early 1990s involving allegations of SA and exploitation of underage boys who worked as ring crew members for the WWE. The scandal first came to light in 1992 when Tom Cole, a former ring boy, filed a lawsuit against Pat Patterson, Terry Garvin, and Mel Phillips, who were all prominent figures in WWE at the time. Cole alleged that he and other boys had been SA'd by these three men. As the legal battle unfolded, more and more ring boys came forward with similar allegations. Pat Patterson, Terry Garvin, and Mel Phillips all had different accusations lobbied toward them. Tom Cole accused Pat Patterson of fondling his private areas on numerous occasions when he was only 13 years old, and constantly licking his lips while ogling him. Terry Garvin was very similar to Pat Patterson, but only in a more open way. Terry Garvin SA'd underage ring boys on a regular basis, and he used his job to arrange not safe for work rendezvous with the young boys. Tom Cole also said that when he was 16 years old, Terry Garvin offered him coke and all kinds of illegal substances if he were to fornicate with him, but he refused. It gets even worse with former WWE ring announcer Mel Phillips, who was once caught by a few wrestlers in the early 1980s doing some unspeakable things to a 10-year-old boy in a car. It was reported to a security guard right away, who said he'd handle it, but for whatever reason, nothing came of it. Tom Cole also claimed that he was SA'd by Phillips when he was 13 years old. Mel Phillips was also accused of videotaping some of the disturbing acts that he committed with these young boys. After all of these allegations came to light, Pat Patterson, Mel Phillips, and Terry Garvin were fired from WWE, and the case was settled out of court with Tom Cole. Pat Patterson was the only one of these predators to get rehired by WWE. And up next we have the ghost of Owen Hart haunting Kemper Arena. On May 23, 1999, professional wrestling changed forever. Owen Hart, the beloved brother of Bret Hart, died during a live WWF pay-per-view as part of his entrance as the Blue Blazer. Owen was said to be lowered from the rafters by cable, but the release mechanism triggered too early and he fell nearly 80 feet, striking the ropes and then the ring. He was rushed to hospital, but it was too late. Ever since that tragic night, the Kemper Arena has been plagued by chilling rumors. Many believe that Owen's spirit still haunts the place where his life ended. A news article confirmed this, saying, "Employees have claimed to have seen him in the rafters wearing the same costume he was wearing for his gimmick, as well as the cable before he began the descent. There have also been reports of flickering lights and other power sources that seem to go on and off in some areas of the arena. Maybe it's just bad wiring or stories passed around to stir up old emotions, but others believe that something deeper is at play. No formal paranormal investigation has been done, maybe out of respect or maybe out of fear." And up next we have Stone Cold Steve Austin gets domestic. Steve Austin is one of the biggest names in wrestling history. Even though he's not the most decorated WWE superstar in history, his character and gimmick made him the biggest name in the industry during his prime. However, outside the ring, Austin hasn't always been a model citizen. In June of 2002, Austin's then wife, Debra Marshall, complained to police after the rattlesnake reportedly assaulted her at their home. Austin was arrested and given 12 months probation, fined $1,000, and required to complete 80 hours of community service. Since Stone Cold was one of the biggest stars in WWE at the time, Vince McMahon reportedly made Debra sign a non-disclosure agreement, ensuring the story of abuse wouldn't go public. This wasn't the last time Austin was involved in a similar incident. In March of 2004, police were once again called after his then-girlfriend, Tess Broussard, alleged that Austin had assaulted her. No arrests were made and no charges were filed in that case. Despite Austin's history of alleged abuse against women, he remains one of the biggest draws in WWE history, even though he only makes sporadic appearances and no longer competes. And up next we have the Vince McMahon sends Scott Hall and Kevin Nash to destroy WCW conspiracy theory. Kevin Nash and Scott Hall had performed for Vince's WWF in the 90s as Diesel and Razor Ramon, but they jumped ship to WCW at a time when Eric Bischoff was given more control of the company. Nash and Hall debuted for WCW as the outsiders, with the implication that they had been sent by Vince McMahon and the WWF to kill WCW. This storyline was pushed even further when Hulk Hogan joined the team at Bash at the Beach 1996 to form the New World Order. Several conspiracy theorists have claimed that this storyline wasn't entirely fictional. They believe Hall and Nash didn't go to WCW just for the money, but were actually sent to destroy Vince's rival promotion from the inside, allowing WWF to rise to dominance once again. Even though the NWO initially put more eyes on WCW's product, they eventually played a massive role in the company's downfall, and allegedly this was all part of Vince's master plan. And up next we have Ashley Massaro. Ashley Massaro was a rising star in WWE, known for her charisma, beauty, and energy in the ring. But behind the glamour, Massaro was battling demons that the public never saw, ones that ultimately consumed her. During her WWE tenure, she was selected for a military goodwill tour, traveling with WWE talent to Afghanistan, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia to support US troops. But this trip turned into a nightmare. Massaro was then allegedly R-worded at a US military base during the tour. When she confided in WWE's doctor, he informed Vince McMahon, and instead of Vince McMahon supporting her, Vince allegedly pressured her into silence, claiming that going public would damage WWE's relationship with the military. Massaro, traumatized and vulnerable, complied, and was left to deal with the pain on her own. She later said that WWE offered no counseling and no support, but this wasn't the only dark cloud over her time in WWE. Former WWE star Paul London claimed that Vince McMahon SA'd Massaro multiple times, allegedly pressuring her to fly alone with him on his private jet. London said that Massaro was deeply distressed, often breaking down in tears over what she endured behind the scenes. By 2008, she had left WWE, but the damage was done. Years later, in 2016, Massaro joined a class action lawsuit against WWE, accusing them of concealing the risks of concussions and neurological damage. As part of the case, she publicly revealed the assault that she suffered on the military tour and detailed how McMahon silenced her. But in 2018, the lawsuit was dismissed, and Ashley Massaro was awarded nothing. The weight of everything she endured dragged her into a deep depression, and on the morning of May 15, 2019, Massaro failed to show up for a radio job, and the next morning, paramedics found her unresponsive in her Long Island home. She was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. At just 39 years old, Ashley Massaro had killed herself. And up next, we have the WWE 2K20 glitches. One of the most embarrassing moments in WWE's digital history is the cursed launch of WWE 2K20. What was supposed to be the next evolution in WWE gaming turned into a full-blown disaster that left fans questioning whether the game was even tested before release. From the moment players booted it up, everything was broken. Characters fell through the ring, faces melted during entrances, referees teleported, and ropes danced like they were alive. What was meant to simulate wrestling started to feel like a surreal fever dream. Some even described it as haunted. Behind the scenes, things were just as messy. Yuke's, the longtime developer of WWE games, had walked away from the franchise, leaving the video game developer Visual Concepts to pick up the pieces with almost no time. What followed was a rushed, unfinished shell of a product released under the WWE name. The fallout was massive, and refunds were demanded. Memes exploded, and in a shocking move, 2K21 was cancelled outright. It was the first time in nearly 2 decades that WWE skipped a yearly title. And up next, we have Charlotte Flair leaks. Charlotte Flair is one of the most successful women's wrestlers of all time. But in 2017, her world came crashing down when private photos of her were stolen from her cell phone and leaked to the public. Charlotte Flair tweeted, "Private photos of mine were stolen and shared publicly without my consent. These images must be removed from the internet immediately." Several fans showed their support to Charlotte with the hashtag #IStandWithCharlotte. And up next, we have the Brock Lesnar and Braun Strowman shoot. Brock Lesnar, the former UFC heavyweight champion and NCAA Division I heavyweight wrestler, is the one person you probably don't want to shoot on. Brock's sports entertainment career has gone by without him feeling the urge to humiliate an opponent, even though the Next Big Thing's credentials speak for themselves and he could handle almost any player on the roster at will. Even though Lesnar is a pro and won't shoot on anyone for fun, he also won't take a hard shot without returning a receipt, as Braun Strowman discovered during the 2018 Royal Rumble pay-per-view. In the triple threat WWE Universal Championship bout against Lesnar and Kane, the monster among men became a bit too enthusiastic and gave the beast incarnate a full-on knee to the side of the face. Brock was roused by it, and he struck Braun with a shoot strike to the middle of his abdomen and then again to his head. Lesnar definitely rocked Strowman, as Strowman legitimately stumbled to the floor before getting back to his feet. Lesnar allegedly told Braun to slow down and not punch so hard in the future. And up next, we have the Chris Benoit Wikipedia entry. On June 25, 2007, just after midnight, an anonymous user updated Chris Benoit's Wikipedia page to state that he had missed a WWE event due to the death of his wife Nancy. This was nearly 14 hours before police discovered the bodies in Benoit's home. Even more chilling, the edit was traced back to Stamford, Connecticut, the location of WWE's headquarters. The discovery of this edit made the internet go on fire. Many believe that it was evidence of a cover-up, or that someone close to WWE knew about the deaths before they were officially reported. Had information leaked before the authorities even arrived? And had WWE insiders tried to control the narrative? The situation became serious enough that the police got involved. Investigators eventually tracked the edit down to a 21-year-old college student named Matthew Greenberg, who lived in Stamford at the time. When questioned, Greenberg insisted that it was just a coincidence. He claimed that he had no inside knowledge and had simply added the information based on internet rumors that he had heard. Greenberg was let go after questioning and the case was dropped. WWE denied any involvement and the story was chalked up as a bizarre coincidence. But even with an explanation, the mystery lingers. The odds of a random Wikipedia edit predicting a murder hours before it was officially discovered are astronomically low. Was it truly a case of blind speculation, or was Matthew Greenberg involved in the murder and he knew more than he was willing to admit? The Wikipedia edit remains one of the strangest, most unsettling details in the Benoit case, an anomaly that still doesn't sit right with many people to this day. And up next we have the Roman Reigns fakes cancer conspiracy theory. In 2018, Roman Reigns shockingly relinquished the Universal Championship after revealing that he had been diagnosed with leukemia. This segment was one of the most emotional moments, not just of the year, but in Monday Night Raw and WWE history. However, this incident led to some wrestling fans questioning whether Roman Reigns actually had cancer. After years of WWE trying their best to get Roman Reigns over with the fans, some believe the company had resorted to faking a leukemia diagnosis to gain sympathy and support for him. Fans online pointed out that Roman Reigns showed minimal hair or weight loss, which they felt was suspicious. They also questioned the legitimacy of the illness because, during his 4-month absence, Roman Reigns filmed Fast and Furious Hobbs and Shaw and then returned just in time for WrestleMania. And up next we have the Droz Incident. Droz was a natural athlete, a former NFL player who transitioned into wrestling with an unconventional gimmick, as he had the ability to vomit on command, earning him the nickname Puke. However, on October 5, 1999, during a taping of SmackDown, Droz's life would change. Droz faced D'Lo Brown in what should have been a routine match, but one move changed everything. Brown went for his running powerbomb, a move that he had executed countless times before, but this time something went wrong. Accounts vary. Some say Droz's loose shirt made it difficult for D'Lo Brown to get a proper grip. Others suggest it was a slip. But what's undeniable is the landing. Droz didn't rotate fully. Instead of taking the impact across his back, he came down directly on his head. The arena fell silent as the reality of what had just happened set in. Droz couldn't move. The referees and medical staff rushed into the ring and the match was immediately stopped. He was rushed to the hospital where doctors confirmed the worst. He had fractured 2 vertebrae in his neck and he was paralyzed from the neck down. D'Lo Brown was devastated, taking responsibility for the accident even though Droz never blamed him. In fact, Droz repeatedly defended Brown, insisting that it was a tragic accident and not his opponent's fault. Despite losing his ability to walk, Droz remained a part of WWE, contributing to their website and magazine. Over the years, he regained limited movement in his upper body, but never fully recovered, and in 2023, he passed away at the age of 54 due to complications from his paralysis. And up next we have Andre the Giant arrested. Andre the Giant is one of the most recognizable and significant WWE superstars of all time. He stood at a massive 7 foot 4 inches and weighed 520 pounds, making him a colossal draw for WWE. However, he had his fair share of legal troubles. It started in the mid-1980s when Andre was involved in a confrontation with a group of rowdy fans at a hotel bar. Reportedly, one of the fans became aggressive toward Andre, leading to a scuffle. During the incident, Andre's patience ran thin, and he ended up flipping over a car belonging to one of the fans. As a result, Andre was arrested, but due to his immense size and celebrity status, the charges were eventually dropped. This wasn't the only time Andre faced legal issues, as in 1989, he assaulted a cameraman. Apparently, the cameraman had been told not to film Andre's match, only his entrance. However, after the match, Andre believed the cameraman had filmed the whole thing, and he went berserk. He assaulted the cameraman and destroyed his camera. When police arrived on the scene, Andre initially refused to go with them, but eventually complied, on the condition that they wouldn't handcuff him. He was then booked for assault and property damage. Andre was eventually found not guilty of assault, but was fined $100,000 for criminal mischief and ordered to pay $233 in restitution to the cameraman for the damaged equipment. The cameraman was reportedly roughed up pretty badly and wore a neck brace for a short time, though he recovered fully. And up next we have time travelers in wrestling. One of the eeriest theories floating around the world of pro wrestling is that time travelers have attended WWE shows. It all starts at WWE SummerSlam in 1988, when a fan held up a sign that read, "Demolition will topple the Twin Towers." At the time, it was a reference to the tag team Demolition facing off against Akeem and the Big Boss Man, known as the Twin Towers. But this was a full 13 years before the horrific events of 9/11, making the sign feel far more disturbing in hindsight. Another unsettling moment happened during a match between JBL and Rey Mysterio, when a fan held up a sign that said, "Triple H fears CM Punk." At that point, CM Punk hadn't even debuted in WWE, and his eventual real-life heat with Triple H wouldn't occur until several years later. Then there's the Mankind vs. The Rock segment in 1999, when someone in the crowd held up a sign that said, "Enzo is a jabroni." Enzo Amore wouldn't appear on WWE television a whole 14 years later. And in 2003, during a Matt Hardy appearance, a fan held up a sign that read, "V1 has been deleted." It seemed meaningless at the time, but in retrospect, it eerily foreshadowed the broken Matt Hardy gimmick, which wouldn't come into existence for another 13 years. But perhaps the most shocking incident to do with time travelers in wrestling is to do with Daniel Bryan. It goes back to the late 80s. During a classic WWF show featuring the Brainbusters, Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, managed by Bobby the Brain Heenan, versus some other wrestlers. In the background, there's a man, an employee, but when the viewers look closer, they notice something deeply unsettling. The man bore an uncanny resemblance to Daniel Bryan, not just any version of him, but the Wyatt family Daniel Bryan. A look that Bryan wouldn't adopt until decades later during his brief time aligned with Bray Wyatt. And yet, there he was, in the crowd in the 1980s. Some say it's just a look-alike, and others believe it's Bryan Danielson himself. And up next we have the Sonny, Shawn Michaels and Chris Candido love triangle. Sonny was one of the WWE's most popular personalities in the 1990s. Chris Candido, her real-life boyfriend, was a talented wrestler who rose up the ranks alongside her. The two were together long before their WWE days. While Sonny and Chris Candido were still in a relationship, rumors began circulating that Sonny and one of WWE's biggest stars at the time, Shawn Michaels, were romantically involved. Allegedly, Sonny and Michaels had an affair during their time together in WWE in the mid-1990s. It is alleged that Sonny's boyfriend Candido knew what was going on, but was reluctant to do anything about it because Shawn Michaels was higher than him on the card, and he was scared of getting fired. This reportedly caused friction backstage, and many viewed Candido sympathetically due to his well-known devotion to Sonny. Some believe that Candido suffered professionally because of Michaels' relationship with Sonny. Candido was relegated to lower-tier matches and didn't receive the push his talent might have otherwise earned, possibly due to this personal issue. While Sonny and Michaels' relationship came to an end, eventually, Sonny kept on cheating on Candido with multiple other wrestlers with Candido's knowledge, and Candido didn't do anything about it. And up next we have the Brock Lesnar shoots on the Undertaker conspiracy theory. Brock Lesnar famously defeated the Undertaker at WrestleMania 30, much to the dismay and shock of wrestling fans around the world. This conspiracy theory suggests that Brock was actually supposed to lose the match, but instead, he thought, "Screw it, I'm taking the win," and went into business for himself. According to this theory, Brock dumped the tired, aging Undertaker on his head, causing him to suffer a concussion, and then legitimately pinning him, ending the streak for real. What makes this theory especially interesting is that Paul Heyman himself was the one who first brought it up publicly, and heavily implied that Brock Lesnar stole the win that night. And up next we have the Hulk Hogan leaks. Hulk Hogan is one of the most popular wrestlers of all time, but in 2012, a sex tape featuring Hulk Hogan and Heather Clam, the then wife of Hogan's best friend and radio personality, Bubba the Love Sponge, was leaked to the public. The tape was recorded without Hogan's consent, allegedly by Bubba, who reportedly had an open relationship with his wife, allowing her to sleep with other men. The tape was widely condemned and ridiculed, leading to significant embarrassment for Hogan. The scandal tarnished his public image as an all-American hero. It got worse in 2015 when audio leaked from the tape that revealed that Hogan had made racist comments. He used the N-word multiple times and expressed disdain for his daughter Brooke dating a black man. These comments led to widespread outrage, and Hulk Hogan being temporarily taken out of the WWE Hall of Fame. And up next we have the death of Eddie Guerrero. Born into the legendary Guerrero family, Eddie Guerrero had natural charisma, in-ring genius, and an underdog spirit that made fans love him. But behind the scenes, he fought a war against addiction and substance abuse, one that cost him everything. But that wasn't all. Like many wrestlers of his era, he used roids to maintain his physique and keep up with the brutal demands of WWE's schedule. This cocktail of substance abuse, PEDs, and painkillers took a toll on his body. He eventually reached the peak of his career when he won the WWE Championship in 2004, but his past left scars that couldn't heal. Years of abuse to his body had damaged his heart, and on November 13, 2005, Eddie was found unconscious in his hotel room by his nephew, Chavo Guerrero. Paramedics arrived, but it was too late. Eddie was pronounced dead at just 38 years old, and the cause was acute heart failure. His death rocked the wrestling world, and the next night, WWE held a Raw tribute show where even the toughest of wrestlers broke down on TV, most notably Chris Benoit. Eddie Guerrero's death was truly one of the saddest days in professional wrestling. And up next we have Daniel Bryan fakes retirement conspiracy theory. Daniel Bryan was forced to temporarily retire in 2016 after suffering from at least 10 documented concussions throughout his career. While Bryan was genuinely hurt, this conspiracy theory suggests that his retirement wasn't truly necessary and that he was pushed into it by WWE management. At the time, Bryan was pulling in top-level numbers and had fans firmly behind him, but Vince McMahon reportedly didn't see him as the guy and instead wanted to build the company around Roman Reigns. Bryan was seen as a threat to that plan, constantly overshadowing Roman, who was still struggling to get truly over with the crowd. So, according to this theory, WWE refused to clear Bryan, not because he wasn't healthy, but because they wanted to keep him out of the spotlight. Daniel Bryan pursued experimental therapies and extensive rehab, eventually getting cleared by multiple independent doctors, but WWE still refused to clear him. At the time, the company was involved in a concussion-related lawsuit, and Bryan had a history of downplaying his injuries, giving WWE another excuse to keep him shelved. But the situation shifted as Bryan's WWE contract neared its expiration date. He made it clear that he would return to the ring, with or without WWE, and even New Japan Pro Wrestling showed interest in signing him. Another layer to this conspiracy theory is that WWE only cleared him at the last minute to stop him from wrestling elsewhere. A move made out of business desperation, not concern for his health. And up next we have Vince McMahon covers up a murder. In the 1980s, Superfly Jimmy Snuka was one of the top baby faces in WWF. In 1983, Snuka was romantically involved with Nancy Argentino, despite being married at the time. The two were staying in a motel in Pennsylvania while WWF was in town for a television taping. After returning to his motel, Snuka called an ambulance for Nancy. When emergency personnel arrived, she was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. Nancy Argentino was pronounced dead shortly after. The coroner's report concluded that she had died from a traumatic brain injury, consistent with a moving head striking a stationary object. The autopsy revealed more than 24 cuts and bruises all over her body. The forensic pathologist stated that the case should be investigated as a homicide. Snuka was immediately considered the prime suspect. According to police interviews, Snuka initially told at least 5 people, including the responding officer, that he had shoved Nancy, causing her to fall and hit her head. He later changed his story, saying he was misunderstood and that she had slipped and hit her head while stopping along the highway to use the bathroom. In yet another version, he claimed that he returned from the tapings and found her unresponsive in bed, prompting the emergency call. Just 3 weeks after Nancy's death, the case went cold. This happened after a mysterious meeting between Jimmy Snuka, Vince McMahon, and the local district attorney. There is no official record of what was discussed in that meeting, but in Snuka's autobiography, he claimed that Vince McMahon showed up with a briefcase full of money. Snuka claimed that he didn't know what happened to that briefcase full of money, but he maintained that he never hurt Nancy. These chilling revelations led to the case being reopened in 2015, over 32 years later. Snuka was arrested and charged with third-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter. However, the case was ultimately dismissed. Snuka was declared mentally unfit to stand trial, as he was suffering from dementia and battling stomach cancer. Just 2 weeks after the charges were dropped, Snuka passed away in Florida at the age of 73. And up next we have Radio WWF. Radio WWF was a professional wrestling radio show produced by the WWF, now WWE. It provided live commentary for pay-per-views and covered news and discussion surrounding the wrestling industry as a whole. The show ran for a period of time but was eventually cancelled, likely due to low station syndication. Each version of the show struggled to attract enough stations to carry it. Because of this, recordings of Radio WWF are scarce, and what remains has become coveted media among fans who are interested in alternate pay-per-view commentary and rare WWF broadcasts. While a few Radio WWF recordings have surfaced online, they are extremely limited compared to the number of shows that were produced, making them somewhat of lost media from a forgotten corner of wrestling history. And up next we have RVD arrested while being WWE Champion. In 2006, Rob Van Dam was on fire. At ECW One Night Stand, Rob Van Dam pinned John Cena and won the WWE Championship. 1 week later, Paul Heyman awarded RVD the ECW Championship as well, making him a double champion. WWE had big plans for Rob Van Dam. his popularity wasn't at an all-time high, and he was finally getting the main event push that fans had long demanded. But unfortunately, that momentum came to a screeching halt when RVD got in trouble with the law. While driving from Virginia to Philadelphia with Sabu, RVD was caught speeding well above the limit. Under normal circumstances, that might have just meant a ticket, but things escalated quickly when the officer smelled marijuana and decided to search the car. The search turned up 18 grams of marijuana, painkillers, and a few other substances. Both RVD and Sabu were arrested, and for Van Dam, the timing couldn't have been worse. Vince McMahon was furious. Within days, RVD dropped the WWE Championship to Edge, and the very next night, he lost the ECW Championship to The Big Show. WWE also handed him a 30-day suspension. Though he returned after the suspension, RVD never regained his main event status, and his big push had ended just as quickly as it began. And up next, we have fan slaps Alexa Bliss's backside. Sometimes, fans get a little too excited when interacting with their favorite WWE stars, and that can lead to weird or downright inappropriate moments, like what happened to Alexa Bliss in August of 2017. After finishing their match at a WWE live event, Nia Jax lifted Alexa Bliss over her shoulder and began walking backstage. Bliss had her head down and likely had no idea where she was headed. But just as Jax turned near the ramp, a young fan reached out and slapped Alexa Bliss on her backside. A year later, in an interview, Bliss revealed that she and Nia laughed off the incident backstage, but while it may have seemed harmless in the moment, it's a clear example of inappropriate fan behavior. And up next, we have Jeff Hardy 2009 arrest. In 2009, just weeks after leaving WWE, Jeff Hardy's personal demons caught up to him in a major way. On September 11th, Hardy was arrested at his home in North Carolina, and what authorities found was nothing short of shocking. Police uncovered a massive stash of drugs, over 200 Vicodin pills, 180 Soma tablets, 555 milliliters of roids, and a stash of coke. On top of that, they found drug paraphernalia and other substances scattered around the house. Hardy was immediately charged with multiple felonies related to drug trafficking and possession. For many fans, it was a brutal wake-up call, and Jeff had always walked a thin line between charismatic daredevil and self-destructive soul. But this arrest pulled the curtain back completely, revealing just how bad things have gotten. The timing only made it feel darker. Some fans speculated that WWE knew about his issues and pushed him out to avoid being connected to the fallout. Jeff eventually pleaded guilty and avoided serious jail time, but the incident cast a long shadow over his legacy. And up next we have Tommy Dreamer almost murders Paul Heyman at WrestleMania 17. After ECW folded in 2001, one of the company's top stars, Tommy Dreamer, fell into a deep depression. He had stuck with the promotion through the highs and lows, even going as far to invest all of his money and some of his parents' money in an effort to keep ECW alive. But what crushed him most was seeing his former boss, Paul Heyman, now working comfortably for WWE. Dreamer had once turned down a $750,000-year deal from WCW out of loyalty to Paul Heyman and ECW. But to Dreamer, it became clear that that loyalty wasn't mutual. The breaking point came when Dreamer received an offer to appear at WrestleMania 17, only to have that offer pulled at the last minute. This situation even forced him to move back in with his parents, and that caused him to snap. He then bought a gun and made a plan. He would attend WrestleMania 17 at the Houston Astrodome with or without invitation. His intent, according to his own words, was to murder Paul Heyman while he was on commentary and then take himself out in front of tens of thousands of people. Fortunately, before the event, Jim Ross called Dreamer and promised him that WWE would hire him. That phone call snapped him out of the darkness. Dreamer later admitted that he had been inches away from making a life-altering, irreversible decision. And up next we have John Cena, a cheater. Former WWE star John Cena has been rumored, speculated, and even in some circumstances outed as having numerous affairs both while dating and married to his high school sweetheart, Liz Herberdow. In 2012, Cena was romantically linked to adult video star Kendra Lust. Rumors spread of his affair with Kendra Lust ultimately led to his divorce from Liz. That is, until Kendra herself spoke out. According to Kendra, not only did she say she did not have an affair with John Cena, she also stated that the two never even met. Kendra, who in real life is a big wrestling fan, did however state that if the opportunity ever arose where Cena wanted to pursue a not safe for work relationship with her, she was all for it. That's not to say that Cena is 100% in the clear. While the Kendra Lust and John Cena affair might be nothing more than just a rumor, Cena was implicated as having an affair with former WWE divas Mickie James and Tara. And up next we have the tragedy of Chyna. Chyna was a trailblazer, a woman who shattered barriers in a male-dominated industry. She redefined what was possible for women in wrestling, but after leaving WWE in 2001, her life spiraled into darkness. After WWE, Chyna turned to the adult film industry, starring in multiple films, including one with her ex, X-Pac, titled One Night in China. The wrestling world watched as she became more detached, more lost, battling addiction and mental health struggles. She appeared on Celebrity Rehab, revealing a deep struggle with alcohol and prescription drug abuse. WWE even offered to pay for her rehab, but Chyna refused, paranoid about their intentions. By 2016, she was living in isolation, her life a cycle of brief attempts at recovery followed by relapses. Then on April 20, 2016, Chyna was found dead in her home at age 46, and the cause was an accidental overdose of alcohol, oxycodone, Xanax, and muscle relaxers. The news devastated the wrestling community. Once an icon, now gone. It wasn't until 2019 that WWE finally inducted her into the WWE Hall of Fame, but even then, it was a part of DX, not as an individual, and she still has yet to be inducted as an individual to this day. And up next, we have the scratch logo appeared before the Attitude Era. Everyone associates WWF's iconic scratch logo with the rebellious, blood-soaked chaos of the Attitude Era, a symbol forever linked to Stone Cold, The Rock, and that era's unapologetic edge. Officially, it debuted in 1997 as part of the WWF's full rebranding into something darker, edgier, and more real. But there's a strange anomaly buried deep in gaming history. In the 1994 video game, WWF Raw, released 3 years before the Attitude Era began, fans noticed something chilling. During the loading screen before matches, a small but unmistakable version of the scratch logo appears on the side of the ring monitor. It's not a glitch, it's not a coincidence, it's the same jagged, aggressive logo that wouldn't become official until much later. No official explanation has ever been given, but if you look close enough, the Attitude Era may have started long before Vince McMahon ever said the word attitude on TV. And up next we have Brian Pillman. Brian Pillman was a wild card in professional wrestling, a man whose loose cannon persona blurred the lines between fiction and reality. But behind the chaos of his character was a body breaking down. Years of injuries, including a devastating ankle injury in a car crash, left him reliant on painkillers just to keep performing. His body was deteriorating, but he refused to slow down. He signed with WWE in 1996, but by then he was a shell of the athlete that he once was, wrestling through excruciating pain. On October 5, 1997, Pillman was scheduled to face Dude Love at WWE's In Your House Bad Blood pay-per-view, but he never showed up. Concerned, police forced their way into his Bloomington, Minnesota hotel room. Inside, they found Pillman dead at just 35 years old. The cause was a massive heart attack caused by an undiagnosed heart disease, the same genetic condition that had taken his father's life at a young age. Years of painkiller use and physical abuse had only exacerbated the inevitable. WWE's handling of his death was disturbing. The next night on Raw, WWE aired an interview with Pillman's grieving widow, Melanie, pressing her about her drug use and financial troubles in a moment that many saw as insensitive and exploitative. And up next we have the Charlotte Flair and Nia Jax shoot. A shoot incident happened during a match between Nia Jax and Charlotte Flair on the August 30, 2021 episode of Monday Night Raw. At one point, the match took a turn for the worse, and it became evident that the two were clearly not cooperating. Nia Jax's back suplex on Charlotte, which dropped her hard at a slight angle, may have set the stage because after that, the two started to hit each other with legitimate strikes, with Jax trying to swat her away and audibly yelling, "Go, don't," to her opponent. After a few pushes and slaps, the Queen began sandbagging on maneuvers, and Nia responded with a few retorts. There were other embarrassing situations where one of them attempted to execute some prearranged maneuvers, but the other person failed to receive the memo, throwing their timing entirely off. When Nia Jax pinned Charlotte after a very stiff powerbomb, the situation thankfully ended. And up next we have the fabulous Moolah allegations. The fabulous Moolah was a legendary and pioneering figure in women's wrestling. Rising to prominence in the mid-20th century, she became one of the most successful and enduring female wrestlers of all time. Her career spanned decades, and she famously held the Women's World Championship for an unprecedented 28 years, effectively giving her a monopoly over women's wrestling for generations. However, beneath the surface of her legacy lies a far darker story. Moolah operated a wrestling school. Multiple women have come forward accusing Moolah of acting as a pimp, providing her trainees to wrestling promoters under the guise of bookings, only for those women to be used as objects by promoters and male wrestlers. Many claim that they were not told of these arrangements beforehand, and those who refused to comply were reportedly R-worded. Some also alleged that they were given hard drugs, seemingly as a way to create addiction and dependency, further cementing Moolah's control over them. Disturbingly, there are also reports that some trainees were also forced to engage in lewd acts with Moolah herself in order to stay in her good graces. Moolah herself would openly be homophobic, but she would engage in lesbianism, revealing a deep layer of hypocrisy and manipulation. These horrifying allegations have since tainted Moolah's legacy. And up next we have Hulk Hogan chokes out a TV host. In the build-up to the very first WrestleMania, just 5 days before the event, Hulk Hogan appeared on a talk show called Hot Properties, hosted by comedian Richard Belzer. Belzer, known for a sarcastic tone, repeatedly insisted that Hogan and Mr. T demonstrate a wrestling move on him. His attitude was that wrestling was fake, a dangerous opinion to voice during the kayfabe-heavy era of the 1980s. Hogan and Mr. T initially resisted, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of breaking character or exposing the business on live television. But Belzer wouldn't let it go. He kept pushing, and eventually Hogan gave in. What followed was no demonstration. Hogan legitimately locked Belzer into a front chinlock and applied real pressure. Within seconds, Belzer was choked out unconscious, collapsed limp to the studio floor, smacking his head hard as he landed. The moment was caught live on camera and left the audience stunned. Belzer later sued Hulk Hogan for $5 million, citing serious personal injury. The case was eventually settled out of court, but the incident has since become a legendary cautionary tale in wrestling. And up next, we have the Mr. Perfect Mandela Effect. There's a phenomenon known as the Mandela Effect, where a large group of people remember something one way, only to find out that it never happened like that at all. It gets its name from the belief that Nelson Mandela died in prison in the 1980s, something countless people from around the world vividly recall, even though he only officially passed away in 2013. Some say it's faulty memory, but others believe it's something far more disturbing. There's a theory that the Mandela Effect is actually evidence of the multiverse, a sign that we've slipped through alternate timelines where certain things really did happen differently. And now, it's happening in wrestling. Many fans swear that they remember Mr. Perfect as Curt Hennig, spelt with an N. They're absolutely certain that's how WWE introduced him. But in this timeline, it's Curt Hennig, and it always has been Curt Hennig. Some say it's mispronunciations from commentators or production crew typos, but even when you see the correct version, it still feels off. And up next we have the Jerry Lawler SA. Jerry Lawler, in addition to being a legendary Memphis wrestler, was one half of the greatest announcing duos in the history of the business. Jim Ross doing play-by-plays plus Jerry Lawler doing comedic heel commentary was absolute gold. But in 1993, Lawler faced a scandal that could have destroyed his career. Lawler was charged with the R-word of a 13-year-old girl, and although these charges were eventually dropped, Lawler did plead guilty to harassing a witness in the case who was a 14-year-old girl who was going to testify against him. Initially, WWE suspended Lawler, but then they let him back into the fold after the worst charges were dropped. And now we're moving down the iceberg into Tier 7, with our first entry on Tier 7 being The Ultimate Warrior replaced Conspiracy Theory. The Ultimate Warrior was one of the biggest stars in the WWF during the late 80s and was seen as the heir to Hulk Hogan's throne after defeating him for the WWF Championship at WrestleMania 6 in 1990. However, Warrior didn't quite pan out as the long-term top guy WWE had always hoped for. After losing the title the following year, a series of creative disagreements culminated in the Warrior being fired following SummerSlam 1991. Though Warrior was eventually rehired in 1992, fans noticed something odd. He looked different. He had shorter hair, appeared significantly leaner, and carried himself differently in the ring. This sparked a long-running conspiracy theory. that Jim Hellwig, the man behind the original Ultimate Warrior, had died and that a replacement performer had been put under the paint. Some fans even speculated that it was Kerry Von Erich, better known as the Texas Tornado, who had taken up the mantle of the Warrior. The timing of Von Erich's push, his similar physique, and the coincidental absence of both men at various times only added fuel to the theory. And up next we have Chris Benoit appears in the WWE Thunderdome. During WWE's Thunderdome era in 2020, where fans' live video feeds were broadcasted onto virtual screens, a bizarre, unsettling moment occurred. Chris Benoit's face appeared not once, but twice. The first incident happened shortly after the Thunderdome concept launch. A fan managed to display an image of Benoit's face on the screen, causing immediate controversy. WWE quickly cut the feed, but the damage was done. The internet had already captured screenshots. A second occurrence followed not long after, with yet another Benoit image making it onto the broadcast. After this, WWE tightened its security, implementing stricter monitoring of fan feeds to prevent further incidents. The appearances of Benoit's images in the Thunderdome sparked debates. Some saw it as a dark joke, while others viewed it as an attempt to force WWE to acknowledge a figure that they had erased from history. And up next we have the Toni Storm leaks. AEW star Toni Storm has previously opened up about her ongoing battles with depression and anxiety in the past, stating that it all began when she was 16 years old. Toni Storm got into wrestling to help her mental health, but already 3 years into the wrestling business, Storm suffered serious bouts of depression with the death of her grandfather, issues with family, and struggling to make it in a male-dominated industry. Things got progressively worse for Storm as a private video was leaked all over the internet of her pleasuring herself. She felt violated and mortified and feared the video leak could ruin her career. She decided to cut off mostly everyone, including some family and friends. Around that time, she won the NXT UK Women's title, but admitted that the title victory was during some of her darkest days. Thoughts of ending her life creeped in and out of her mind during that time. Thankfully, she credits a close inner circle of friends and family that helped her through her dark times. And up next, we have DX Blackface. One of the most infamous and controversial moments in WWE and in D-Generation X's history was the segment where DX mocked the Nation of Domination by wearing blackface. It's a moment WWE would very much like fans to forget. In the segment, Triple H portrayed The Rock in full blackface, Sean Waltman dressed as Mark Henry, Road Dogg as D'Lo Brown, and Billy Gunn as The Godfather. This skit was meant to be comedic at the time, but in retrospect, it's widely condemned as tone-deaf, racist, and deeply offensive. WWE has since scrubbed the segment from all official platforms, but for those who remember, or for those who have seen the footage resurface online, there's no denying that it happened, and it remains one of the company's most shameful moments. And up next we have the Vince McMahon sent Vince Russo to kill WCW conspiracy theory. In the mid to late 1990s, Vince Russo was the head writer for WWE and played a major role in shaping the direction of the Attitude Era. His edgy, unpredictable storytelling style was a defining feature of WWE's resurgence at that time. According to Russo, he left WWE in the summer of '99 because he felt the addition of SmackDown stretched his creative limits too thin and would water down his work. Shortly after, Russo jumped ship to WCW, replacing Eric Bischoff at a time when the company was already in decline, with falling ratings, poor pay-per-view numbers, and dwindling attendance. Under Russo's creative control, things didn't get better. They got even worse. His time in WCW was marked by chaotic storytelling, bizarre swerves, and questionable decisions, including booking himself as the WCW World Champion. Fans and critics alike believe that Russo's vision only accelerated WCW's downfall. This gave birth to one of wrestling's most persistent conspiracy theories, that Vince McMahon sent Russo to kill WCW on purpose, a Trojan horse designed to sabotage the competition from within. This theory claims that Russo's reckless booking wasn't just bad, it was intentional. Whether or not that's true, Russo's time in WCW did coincide with the company's final downward spiral, and to this day, some fans believe that Vince McMahon's fingerprints were all over it. And up next we have the Drew McIntyre and Tiffany domestic incident. Before he became a world-traveled indie star, and long before his redemption arc in WWE, Drew McIntyre was the chosen one, handpicked by Vince McMahon himself. He was once viewed as the future of the company. But in 2010, everything changed. Drew's promising rise came to a halt after a disturbing domestic incident involving his then wife, Taryn Terrell, known to WWE fans as Tiffany. In August of that year, police were called after an alleged physical altercation between the two, but in a twist that many fans don't realize, Drew wasn't the aggressor, he was the victim. Tiffany was arrested and suspended indefinitely by WWE. Though the details of the fight were kept mostly under wraps, the damage was already done. Taryn was eventually released from the company and the couple split, but Drew never recovered his standing. Despite his innocence, Drew's reputation seemed to suffer behind the scenes. Once seen as a future world champion, McIntyre was quietly demoted to the lower card, eventually becoming part of the comedic, career-killing faction 3MB. For years, he was just a punchline, another lost opportunity in WWE's long history of failed pushes. It wouldn't be until much later, after leaving the company and reinventing himself as Drew Galloway, that he'd begin to reclaim his name. And up next we have the Batista and Molina scandal. Batista has gone on record labeling women as his drug of choice during his time on the road with the WWE. This penchant for bedroom activity activated a locker room scandal involving him and diva Molina. It was reported in the past that the animal got together with the 5-time women's champion while she was still dating WWE star John Morrison. Just to add a bit more fuel to this alleged fire, it was also reported that Batista was still with his wife, who had been suffering from cancer when the alleged affair took place. After the affair ended, Molina would then end up back in a relationship with John Morrison, which reportedly rattled Vince McMahon up the wrong way, as in his eyes, it made John Morrison look weak. And up next we have the Kurt Angle and Daniel Puder shoot. This shoot incident all went down on the November 4th, 2004 episode of SmackDown. During the show, Season 4 finalists of WWE's Tough Enough were challenged to a squat thrust competition, which contestant Chris Nowacki ultimately won. His prize was an unexpected, off-the-cuff shoot match against the Olympic gold medalist and grappling legend Kurt Angle. As you'd assume, Angle made pretty quick work of Nowacki, legitimately fracturing his ribs and awarding him a one-way paid ticket to the ER. All jacked up, Kurt then extended the shoot challenge to the others, and Daniel Puder took him up on it. After a quick face-off in the ring, the two locked up. Soon, Puder legitimately had Kurt Angle in a Kimura lock. Daniel had gained the full position and could have broken Kurt's arm and sent him into surgery if he wanted. This was obviously not how anyone expected things to go, so veteran referee Jimmy Corderas quickly counted to 3, even though Puder bridged out at 2. As it turned out, Kurt Angle was reportedly less than happy about what transpired, as he felt that he was made to look like a chump to a relative nobody, and he was also angry at the fact that Puder could have legitimately broken his arm. The boys in the locker room were also less than very happy about it, and they sought out to get revenge for the sake of Angle and the wrestling business. So at the next Royal Rumble, the first 4 entrants were Puder, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, and Bob Holly. The 3 men beat the crap out of Puder for a few minutes, then threw him over the top rope. Puder's wrestling career never really took off after this incident, and he was soon gone from WWE. And up next we have the downfall of Sunny. Once dubbed the blonde bombshell of WWE, Sunny was one of the biggest stars of the 1990s. Often considered WWE's first true diva, she was so popular that, by the late 90s, she had earned the title of the most downloaded woman on the internet. But while fans saw a glamorous figure on screen, behind the scenes, her life was unraveling. During her WWE run, Sunny struggled with substance abuse, which eventually led to a firing. She had a short stint in WCW, but that too ended quickly, surrounded by rumors of drug use, including an incident where she was allegedly found passed out in the showers after ingesting Nubane, a powerful painkiller. From 2001 to 2003, Sunny shifted into adult modeling, regularly posing nude for Missy Hyatt's Wrestling Vixen's website. She eventually disappeared from the spotlight for a while, only to return in 2016, this time starring in an adult film under a contract with Vivid Entertainment. The controversy wasn't the film itself, but the fact that she wore her WWE Hall of Fame ring during the shoot. But Sunny's story turns from sad to deeply disturbing with her long history of criminal behavior. Her legal troubles began escalating in 2012, with 5 arrests in just 4 weeks, ranging from disorderly conduct to third-degree burglary and multiple violations of protective orders. Over the years, she would rack up numerous DUIs and other charges, including an arrest for threatening to murder her partner with a pair of scissors, and another for making terroristic threats in January of 2022. But her darkest chapter came just 2 months later. In March of 2022, while driving under the influence of alcohol and weed, Sunny slammed into the back of a car driven by a 75-year-old man, causing a fatal crash. her blood alcohol content was 0.280, more than 3 times the legal limit, and she was driving without a valid license too. This incident led to her being sentenced to 17 years in prison, marking a tragic final descent for someone who once stood at the very top of the wrestling world. And up next we have Triple H doesn't job, even in video games. Triple H's reputation for backstage political power has been debated for years, but in 2008, it extended beyond the ring and into the virtual world. During the promotional campaign for SmackDown vs. Raw 2009, WWE sent a very peculiar memo to the gaming press. Under no circumstances was Triple H to be depicted losing, being beaten down, or shown in any kind of vulnerable position. He had to look strong. Always. This wasn't just about real matches anymore. Now even Pixels had to protect the game's legacy. Most outlets complied, carefully selecting footage and screenshots that kept Triple H looking like the King of Kings, but Fighting Spirit magazine ignored the directive, publishing a screenshot of Triple H getting demolished in-game. Fans laughed and critics nodded, but behind the scenes, it likely ruffled feathers, because if there's one thing you apparently don't do, it's showing Triple H eating a virtual finisher. And up next we have the Seth Rollins leak. In early 2015, Seth Rollins was on fire, but a wild series of events eventually unfolded that put question marks around Seth Rollins. His social media was purportedly hacked, resulting in his account posting a very revealing photo of NXT prospect Zara Schreiber, whom he was seeing at the time. Unfortunately for Rollins, his relationship with Schreiber had been a secret because he was also engaged to a woman named Leila Schultz. His fiancée retaliated by posting a nude photo of Rollins. This all happened in a whirlwind while the architect held the Money in the Bank briefcase and introduced discourse about whether WWE might pull the plug on his main event push, if not cut ties with him altogether. Fortunately, things cooled off after the initial storm. Seth Rollins is now happily married to Becky Lynch. And up next we have Chris Benoit bullies The Miz. In his early WWE days, The Miz faced significant challenges integrating into the locker room culture. An incident that stands out involves The Miz eating chicken in the locker room, leading to severe repercussions. According to reports, Chris Benoit accused The Miz of dropping chicken crumbs onto a fellow wrestler's bag, which was seen as a sign of disrespect. In response, Benoit banned The Miz from the locker room, forcing him to change in hallways and even public restrooms for approximately 6 to 7 months. This punishment persisted until The Undertaker intervened, inviting The Miz back into the locker room and effectively ending his exile. And up next we have Edge was cleared for in-ring action long before his return conspiracy theory. Many years before his epic comeback, Adam Copeland, better known as the rated R superstar Edge, was considered one of the biggest names in professional wrestling. After a successful final babyface run, he was forced to retire in 2011 due to severe neck injuries. At the time, doctors told him that if he ever wrestled again, he'd be putting his life at serious risk. Edge stayed retired for nearly a decade until he shocked the world by returning to WWE for the 2020 Royal Rumble, a comeback fans thought that they'd never see. But according to some conspiracy theorists, Edge may have been cleared to wrestle years early, sometime in the mid-2010s. This theory claims that WWE was aware of his improved health but refused to bring him back, fearing that another injury could lead to catastrophic consequences, both physically and legally. And back then, there wasn't a major alternative promotion in the US for Edge to consider, so instead of going rogue, he simply waited, quietly sitting out. That changed with the rise of AEW. Rumors began swirling that AEW was interested in signing Edge, and suddenly WWE moved fast. The theory suggests that WWE only cleared Edge for in-ring action out of fear that one of their most legendary stars might jump ship to a fresh, rising competitor. And up next we have Charlotte Flair arrested. Before becoming a 14-time WWE Women's Champion and one of the most decorated female wrestlers in history, Charlotte Flair found herself in serious legal trouble, and it had nothing to do with wrestling. In 2008, years before her WWE debut, Charlotte was arrested and charged with assault on a law enforcement officer. According to police reports, concerned neighbors called 911 after hearing a violent commotion coming from the Flair family home. When officers arrived, they found Ric Flair, his daughter Charlotte, and her boyfriend in the house. Rick was reportedly bloodied and bruised, the apparent result of a physical altercation between him and Charlotte's boyfriend. Although Ric Flair declined to press charges, things escalated when Charlotte allegedly kicked a police officer during the investigation. As a result, she was tased by the officer and taken into custody. At just 22 years old, Charlotte Flair was charged with assaulting a law enforcement officer and resisting arrest. Though she would eventually move past the incident and go on to become one of WWE's most dominant stars, the arrest remains as a lesser-known chapter in Flair's turbulent legacy. And up next, we have fans trying to attack wrestlers. There's been many incidents of fans trying to attack wrestlers, but one of those incidents was when a fan attacked Seth Rollins, claiming the wrestler had scammed him. During an interview with Mail Sports in June of 2023, Rollins had talked about this fan who tried to attack him during a Monday Night Raw in November of 2021. The fan had been catfished by someone who pretended to be Rollins and got scammed for thousands of dollars. Rollins said that he had felt very bad about this fan after learning the whole story. The security was a bit late this time, as the fan had managed to jump the barricade and tackle Rollins to the ground, but he was taken care of quickly and later was arrested as well. Another incident of a fan attacking a wrestler is when a fan ruined Bret Hart's WWE Hall of Fame speech. What should have been an emotional moment for Bret Hart was ruined by one fan who somehow managed to get in the ring and tackle him down. He was quickly taken away by wrestlers and security though. And up next, we have the Roy trials of 1993 and 2007. In 1993, WWE chairman Vince McMahon found himself at the center of a major federal investigation. The U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York charged McMahon with violating federal laws regulating roid distribution. He was accused of distributing and encouraging roid use among WWE performers in order to enhance their physiques. The stakes were massive because if found guilty, Vince McMahon was facing up to 11 years in prison and a $1.5 million fine. The trial became one of the most infamous moments in wrestling history. Multiple talents were called to testify, including Hulk Hogan, who admitted to use, but claimed he had never received them from Vince. On the other hand, Nails, a former wrestler with a personal grudge against Vince McMahon, testified that Vince ordered him to juice, though his credibility was heavily questioned. Ultimately, McMahon was acquitted, but the damage was already done. But the juicing controversy didn't end there, because in 2007, following the horrific events of the Chris Benoit tragedy, juicing in wrestling came under intense public scrutiny once again. The US Congress requested that WWE hand over documents relating to its juicing policy. At the time, law enforcement targeted the pharmacy that had supplied Benoit with juice and other drugs. While WWE was never formally charged with wrongdoing, the incident reignited concerns about drug use in the industry. In response, Vince McMahon launched the WWE Wellness Policy, a comprehensive drug testing program intended to clean the company's image and protect its performers. The tragedy, combined with mounting legal and media pressure, also marked a turning point for WWE, as the company shifted into the PG era, a rebrand toward a more family-friendly product. And up next we have the death of Umaga. Eddie Fatu, best known as Umaga, was a force of nature within the WWE. A member of the legendary Anoa'i family, his raw intensity and brutal in-ring style made him one of the most feared superstars of his era. But behind the destruction in the ring, Umaga was battling demons. WWE's grueling schedule and the physical toll of his matches led to a reliance on painkillers and other substances. In 2009, he was released for violating WWE's wellness policy and refusing rehab. His career should have continued elsewhere, but instead, his story took a tragic turn. On December 4, 2009, Umaga was found unresponsive in his Houston home. He had suffered a massive heart attack. He was rushed to the hospital and placed on life support, but doctors couldn't save him. Hours later, Umaga was pronounced dead at just 36 years old. The autopsy revealed the cause: acute toxicity of multiple drugs, including painkillers, muscle relaxers, and anxiety medication. His passing sent shockwaves throughout the wrestling world. And up next we have Alberto Del Rio cheats on Charlotte Flair with Paige. When Alberto Del Rio returned to WWE in 2015, it was rumored that he started an affair with Charlotte Flair. The two were supposedly not in any kind of relationship. It was purely physical. Of course, the main issue was Del Rio was already a married man with kids. Alberto was married to a former model named Angela Valque. While Alberto reportedly fooled around with Charlotte, he began another affair with Paige. Alberto and Paige began to get serious, and when photos of the couple began to surface online, Alberto's wife, Angela, was not the only one a bit shocked. Charlotte found out just like everybody else did, and most likely felt blindsided by it. That started backstage tensions between Charlotte and Paige, who were formerly good friends. Vince McMahon was allegedly told of the tensions between Paige and Charlotte and decided to book them in a match against each other. Apparently, Vince McMahon thought the real-life animosity between the two would make great television. And up next we have the Fabulous Moolah and Mae Young's secret lesbian relationship conspiracy theory. Fabulous Moolah and Mae Young are regarded as legends in women's wrestling, pioneers whose legacies span decades. Throughout their lives, they were known to be inseparable best friends, both on and off the screen. They lived together, supported one another through the ups and downs of the wrestling world, and were even buried next to each other after their passing. However, some conspiracy theorists believe that their bond went far deeper than friendship. This theory suggests that the Fabulous Moolah and Mae Young were actually in a romantic relationship. Over the years, numerous disturbing allegations have surfaced online about Moolah, many of which confirming that she was at least bi. As for Mae Young, she never married and never had any children, which fueled fan speculation even further. With their deep and personal connection, cohabitation, and lifelong loyalty to each other, some fans began to connect the dots, arguing that their relationship was not purely platonic, but rather a secret romantic partnership that was kept under wraps due to the social taboos of their era. While nothing has ever been confirmed, this theory persists, casting a new layer of mystery and intrigue over two of women's wrestling's most iconic figures. And up next we have Triple H married Stephanie McMahon purely for power conspiracy theory. In 1996, Triple H was involved in the now infamous curtain call, a moment where he, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and Shawn Michaels broke kayfabe at Madison Square Garden, embracing in front of the live crowd in a move that defied everything the wrestling business stood for at the time. Because Nash and Hall were leaving for WCW, and Michaels was the top guy, Triple H took the fall alone. He was punished by Vince McMahon and booked into the ground, derailing his momentum for months, but he clawed his way back up the card and, according to some, never forgot what it felt to be out of favor. The basis of this theory is that Triple H was so shaken by the aftermath of the curtain call that he became ruthlessly political, doing whatever it took to ensure he'd never fall from grace again. That includes, according to the conspiracy, pursuing a relationship with the boss's daughter, Stephanie McMahon, as a calculated move to gain Vince's trust and secure long-term power. Triple H began dating Stephanie in 2000, the same year he dubbed himself The Game. Some believe that nickname wasn't just a gimmick, but a statement of intent. He was willing to play any game, even faking love, to win the ultimate prize, control of WWE. After he got with Stephanie, his reign of terror began, a period in the early 2000s where he dominated the world title scene, often at the expense of rising stars. Over the years, he gradually moved behind the scenes, rising through WWE's corporate structure. Now with Vince essentially removed from the company following a series of scandals, Triple H is in charge, leading many to believe that his long-term plan succeeded and that marrying Stephanie was the ultimate power play. And up next we have the real reason Shawn Michaels took a break from wrestling conspiracy theory. In 1998, Shawn Michaels was forced to step away from WWE because of back injuries. He was on the shelf for 4 years and eventually returned to the ring in 2002. There are actually two popular conspiracy theories relating to the real reason why Shawn Michaels stepped away from the ring. One of these theories believes that Shawn wasn't nearly as hurt as everyone thought, but he was running Vince up for essentially an extended vacation with pay, since he knew that Vince wouldn't want him to jump ship to WCW. The second conspiracy is that Shawn Michaels was actually absent for so long to deal with his massive drug problem, which could have ended up really bad if he hadn't addressed it. Conspiracy theorists believe that it's too strange that Shawn Michaels came back just a few years from a career-threatening industry, and not only was he fine, but somehow an even better professional wrestler than he was before. And up next we have the Brock Lesnar arrest. Brock Lesnar is one of the biggest names in the wrestling industry and has made his name in WWE as one of the most legit tough guys in the business. Lesnar signed with WWE in 2000, and a year later he was arrested by police in Louisville, Kentucky, as they suspected him of possessing large amounts of roids. However, the charges were dropped when it was found that the substances recovered were legal growth hormones, and he was released with a clean slate. About a decade later in 2011, Lesnar was charged with hunting violations during a trip to Alberta in late 2010. Lesnar is known to be an avid hunter, and his love for outdoors got him in trouble. He pleaded guilty to a charge of improper tagging of an animal, which led to Lesnar paying a $1,700 fine and receiving a 6-month hunting suspension for the offense. And up next we have the tragedy of Luna Vachon. Luna Vachon was one of the most unique and intense figures in wrestling history. With a raspy voice, chaotic energy, and unmatched presence, she stood out in an era where women in wrestling were often pushed aside. However, after her career, in 2009, she suffered a devastating loss. Her home was destroyed in a fire, taking all of her wrestling memorabilia and personal possessions with it. The fire left her emotionally shattered, and despite support from friends like Mick Foley, the damage was done. Luna had completed rehab in 2009, with WWE even paying for her treatment, but the grip of addiction pulled her back in. She refused to return to wrestling, officially turning down an offer from TNA in early 2010. Then, on August 27, 2010, tragedy struck. Luna was found dead in her Florida home by her mother. She was just 48 years old, and the cause was an overdose of oxycodone and Xanax. Investigators found crushed pills and snorting straws in multiple locations, evidence of an addiction she had been fighting for years. And up next we have the Ultimate Warrior blackmails Vince McMahon. Even though the Ultimate Warrior was one of the biggest stars in WWE during the late 80s and early 90s, behind the scenes, his relationship with Vince McMahon was extremely rocky. The most infamous example of this came in 1991, just before SummerSlam. Warrior was scheduled to be in the main event, teaming with Hulk Hogan, but according to reports, Warrior refused to perform unless Vince paid him a massive lump sum of money up front. Warrior demanded $550,000, claiming he deserved it for his role in the upcoming show and for his drawing power. Warrior refused to go through with the match unless his demands were met, essentially holding Vince and the entire show hostage. Not wanting to ruin the event, Vince gave in and paid Warrior the money, but as soon as the show was over, he fired him. While the Warrior would return to WWE later, the incident permanently damaged his reputation with management and became one of the most notorious backstage power plays in wrestling history. And up next we have the Mark Jindrak Evolution Lost Media. Evolution was a professional wrestling stable that was prominent between 2003 to 2005, consisting of Triple H, Ric Flair, Randy Orton, and Batista. Before Evolution had officially formed, Batista was slated to be in the group. However, when Batista suffered 2 tricep injuries that took him out of action for months, WWE considered replacing him with Mark Jindrak. They even filmed vignettes featuring Jindrak as the 4th man in Evolution's Titantron, but because Jindrak was replaced in Evolution before ever making his debut with the stable, the vignettes featuring him were never used in the final Evolution Titantron. The iconic Titantron with the helicopter and nightclub clips ended up only containing the trio. When Batista was ready to return, WWE simply spliced footage of him into the original vignette. To this day, the footage of Jindrak in those early Evolution vignettes have never been released. And up next we have Shawn Michaels beat up by 6 Marines. Many times in the 90s, Shawn Michaels would get into a lot of trouble, but he was always surrounded by the clique. They often acted as a barrier for Michaels, keeping him grounded and out of trouble to the best of their ability. However, in the autumn of 1995, the rest of the clique were off on a European tour, while Michaels was working the US house show circuit. After one of the shows, Michaels went to a club with a few wrestlers, and after heavy drinking and partying, he decided that he wanted to find a girl to hook up with. He targeted a girl on the dance floor and approached her, but was quickly confronted by her boyfriend, who just happened to be a US Marine. Despite being warned not to talk to her, Michaels went ahead anyway, and the two got into a scuffle. A bouncer stepped in and kicked both men out the club, but waiting outside were 5 more Marines, friends of the man Michaels had just confronted. The 6 Marines beat the living crap out of Shawn Michaels, leaving him with a torn eyelid, black eyes, and other minor injuries. On TV, the events were glorified in Michaels' favor to explain his broken face, but after the Marine in question threatened a lawsuit, the storyline was dropped quickly. Following the incident, Michaels relinquished the Intercontinental Championship due to being unable to compete. However, the real-life beating led to his babyface turn, gaining him sympathy from fans, eventually leading him to winning the Royal Rumble the following year and capturing the WWE Championship at WrestleMania. And up next we have David Schultz, Slaps reporter. David Schultz was a wrestler who competed in many promotions during the 1970s and 80s, including his most well-known stint in the Hart family's Stampede Wrestling promotion. He eventually joined WWE, but something happened that would forever alter his career. In 1984, ABC ran a story aiming to expose the behind-the-scenes aspects of the professional wrestling business. During a WWE house show at Madison Square Garden, reporter John Stossel went backstage to gather material for his expose on pro wrestling. When Stossel started interviewing David Schultz, who had wrestled at the event, things got heated. Things took a violent turn when Stossel told Schultz that he believed that wrestling was fake, which prompted Schultz to slap Stossel twice in the head. After the second slap, Stossel ran off as Schultz continued yelling at him. As a result of the incident, Schultz was suspended by the New York State Athletic Commission, and John Stossel filed a lawsuit against the WWE, though it was later settled out of court. Despite claiming that WWE management told him to hit Stossel, Schultz was fired from the company. And up next we have Bam Bam Bigelow. Bam Bam Bigelow was a one-of-a-kind athlete, a 400-pound monster who moved with the agility of a cruiserweight. But behind his intimidating persona was a man whose body and mind were breaking down. By the early 2000s, Bigelow's career had slowed down due to numerous injuries. Years of punishment, high-risk moves, and a physically demanding style had taken their toll. Like many wrestlers of his era, he turned to painkillers and other substances to cope. And on January 19, 2007, Bam Bam Bigelow was found dead in his home at just 45 years old. The autopsy revealed a lethal combination of coke and Xanax in his system. His death was ruled as accidental. And up next we have Alicia Fox wrestles drunk. Alicia Fox joined WWE in 2006 and was a member of the Ohio Valley Wrestling roster before jumping ship to the main roster, where she made a name for herself. However, Alicia Fox's time on the main roster wasn't always smooth, and she was on thin ice several times due to her behavior. The worst of these incidents came in 2019, when she showed up to a live event intoxicated, under the influence of alcohol. She was scheduled to wrestle a match, and Arn Anderson was the agent assigned to the match that she was involved in. Despite her condition, Arn Anderson allowed her to compete, which led to major backlash. When WWE chairman Vince McMahon found out, he was furious. As a result, Arn Anderson was fired from WWE, despite having worked with the company for almost 20 years. And up next we have Enzo Amore, S.A. Enzo Amore and Big Cass were one of the most popular tag teams during the 2010s era, with Enzo Amore being the biggest star of the two. Unfortunately, in January of 2018, a woman publicly accused Enzo Amore of SAing her in a hotel room in Phoenix, Arizona in 2017. The accuser, identified as Philomena Sheehan, claimed that Amore and his friends had lured her into the room where the alleged assault took place. She also stated that she was incapacitated and unable to give consent. Sheehan shared her account on social media, detailing the alleged incident. Her post quickly went viral, leading to significant backlash against Amore. WWE initially suspended Amore, stating their zero-tolerance policy for matters involving SA, but then, just a day after suspending him, WWE announced that they had terminated Amore's contract, citing his failure to inform the company of the ongoing police investigation prior to the public accusation. While the WWE did not explicitly state his guilt, the company made it clear that withholding such information breached their trust. The Phoenix Police Department conducted an investigation into the allegations, but after several months, they concluded that there was insufficient evidence to proceed with the charges, and the case was officially closed, with no charges against Enzo Amore. And up next we have Nails assaults Vince McMahon. In December of 1992, during a TV taping in Green Bay, former WWE wrestler Nails confronted Vince McMahon backstage over unpaid compensation. According to Nails, he had been promised money that had never materialized, and something broke inside him when he decided to demand what he was owed face to face. Nails said that he burst into Vince's office, demanded payment, and grabbed Vince McMahon by the neck, lifting him off his chair, with Vince McMahon allegedly being thrown to the ground and punched. After the assault, Nails went straight to the phone to call the police, accusing Vince McMahon of assault. The incident led to Nails' immediate firing, followed by lawsuits by both parties. Nails sued for wrongful termination, while WWE counterclaimed. All legal action was eventually dropped. Looking back years later, Nails said that he doesn't regret the confrontation, calling it necessary because McMahon owed him money, and most wrestlers were afraid to stand up to him. And up next we have the John Cena Golden Shovel conspiracy theory. Behind the smiling face and the never give up slogans lies one of the most infamous reputations in modern wrestling lore, John Cena and his so-called Golden Shovel. The term became symbolic of his alleged backstage influence, a power many believe he used to bury rising stars and kill momentum dead in its tracks. Names like Wade Barrett and the rest of the Nexus, Rusev, Bray Wyatt, Damian Sandown, Jack Swagger, Alex Riley, and more were seen as casualties of the Golden Shovel, wrestlers who had white-hot momentum only to be decisively defeated by Cena when it mattered most. Critics argue that Cena's clean wins often came at the expense of long-term storytelling and the future of the roster. Still today, the legend of the Golden Shovel lives on, a metaphorical weapon said to have ended more pushes than bad booking ever did. And up next we have The Undertaker threatens Shawn Michaels backstage at WrestleMania 14. By the time WrestleMania 14 rolled around, Shawn Michaels was known for being a backstage menace, arrogant, erratic, and notoriously difficult to work with. And on that night, the stakes were huge. HBK was set to defend the WWE Championship against a red-hot Stone Cold Steve Austin in what was supposed to be a passing of the torch moment, but no one really trusted him to do the right thing. Still riding heat from his role in the Montreal Screw Job months earlier, many backstage feared that Michaels would pull something shady or outright refuse to put Austin over. One man wasn't taking any chances, and that man was The Undertaker. As the story goes, Taker sat in the locker room, taping up his fist while staring straight at Shawn as he was about to head out to the crowd. It wasn't a bluff, it was a warning. If Michaels didn't do the job, the dead man would have handled it his own way. HBK later confirmed that The Undertaker made it clear to everyone, if Austin didn't walk out as champion, he was gonna knock Shawn's head off the moment he came through the curtain. With Mike Tyson at ringside, Vince watching closely, and The Undertaker literally preparing to throw fists backstage, Shawn played it straight that night and dropped the belt to Austin. And up next we have the Yokozuna death. Yokozuna was a force unlike any other in WWE history. Standing at over 500 pounds, he moved with an agility that defied his size. But behind the dominance was a man battling his own body. As in 1998, Yokozuna's weight had spiraled out of control, and WWE released him after doctors warned of serious health risks. Despite attempts to lose weight and return, he continued wrestling on the independent circuit, unable to let go of the business, but his body just couldn't keep up. Then, on October 23, 2000, tragedy struck. While in Liverpool, England, Yokozuna passed away in his hotel room from pulmonary edema, a condition where fluid builds up in the lungs, making it impossible to breathe. He was just 34 years old. And up next, we have the Sonya Deville attempted kidnapping. Sonya Deville signed with WWE in 2015, but in 2020 she faced one of the scariest moments of her life. In August of that year, a man from South Carolina was arrested for attempting to kidnap her. Philip Thomas, 24, had allegedly been stalking Sonya on social media for years and planning the abduction for over 8 months. He drove from South Carolina to a home in Lutz, Florida, and parked at a nearby church. Armed with a knife, mace, and duct tape, he cut a hole in the patio screen and waited outside. At 2:43 a.m., he entered through the sliding glass door, setting off the home's alarm system. Sonya and her guest, fellow WWE star Mandy Rose, managed to escape and call 911 just in time. When deputies arrived, Thomas admitted that he had driven out of state with the intention of taking Sonya hostage. He was charged and later pleaded guilty to attempted kidnapping, aggravated stalking, and armed burglary. Thomas was sentenced to 15 years in prison. And now we're moving down the iceberg into Tier 6, with our first entry on Tier 6 being William Regal involved in Chris Benoit death conspiracy theory. When WWE aired its tribute show for Chris Benoit on June 25, 2007, before the horrific truth had finally surfaced, most wrestlers delivered emotional tributes, reminiscing about Benoit's in-ring skill and friendship. But one tribute stood out, that of William Regal. While others spoke warmly and nostalgically about Chris Benoit, Regal's demeanor was noticeably different. He looked tense, distant, almost as if he was choosing his words carefully. Unlike his colleagues, he didn't call Benoit a great man or father, nor did he share personal stories. Instead, he simply said, "Now all I'm willing to say is that Chris Benoit was undoubtedly the hardest working man in professional wrestling, and that's all I've really got to say at the moment." The tone and delivery felt off. At the time, many viewers didn't think much of it, but when the real details of the case emerged, Regal's reaction took on a whole new meaning. Why was he so reserved compared to others? And why did he seem to be holding back? This led to wild speculation, some even suggesting that Regal knew something before the full story came out. Adding to this, Regal lived in the same Atlanta area as Benoit, making some wonder if he had heard rumors or disturbing signs before the news broke. Others took it further, with theories implying that Regal was involved in some way. And up next we have Roddy Piper blackface. Roddy Piper was known for his wild promos and mind games, but during his feud with Bad News Brown, things went a little bit too far. For their WrestleMania 6 match, Piper appeared in a bizarre look, painting half his body black. He even wrestled the entire match like this, supposedly to play psychological warfare against his opponent. The strangest part, Piper was booked as the babyface in the feud, making the decision even more confusing. In later interviews, Piper gave half-baked explanations for the stunt, but none of it really justified what happened. This segment aged terribly, and in 2021, WWE removed the promo and match from streaming platforms like Peacock, clearly acknowledging how tone-deaf the moment was. Today, it stands as one of the most controversial missteps in wrestling history. And up next, we have the Molina leaks. Former WWE superstar Molina won 3 women's championships and 2 Divas titles in WWE, so she is somewhat of a big deal in women's wrestling. However, in 2017, nude pictures of her leaked, and these images were only intended for her significant other. In a candid interview, Molina spoke out, calling the incident horrific and comparing it to her past when she was R-worded. Molina also explained that she had refused Playboy offers in the past because she wanted her body to be shared only with someone that she loved, not the world. This incident left a lasting emotional mark, but she ultimately found strength in coping with it and speaking out. And up next, we have Randy Savage giving Hulk Hogan a black eye before WrestleMania 9 conspiracy theory. After stepping away from the ring at WrestleMania 8, Hulk Hogan made his big return a year later at WrestleMania 9, teaming with Brutus Beefcake against Money Inc. But when Hogan showed up, fans noticed something strange. He had a nasty black eye. The kayfabe explanation was that Ted DiBiase paid off some thugs to rough Hogan up before the match. But the official story from Hogan himself was that he got into a jet ski accident. But of course, there's a conspiracy theory that says otherwise. According to the rumor, Randy Savage punched Hogan in the face after finding out that Miss Elizabeth had left him due to Linda Hogan's influence. Some even speculate that Hogan and Elizabeth were secretly having an affair, and when Savage found out, he gave Hogan the black eye himself. The truth has never been confirmed, but to this day, fans still debate what really happened. And up next, we have Brock Lesnar flashes Terry Runnels. In 2020, former WWE diva Terry Runnels came forward with shocking new claims. She claimed that in 2004, backstage at WWE, Brock Lesnar once flashed her in the locker room, exposing himself and calling her a name as she walked past. She emphasized that this wasn't a joke or a casual comment. It was very, very wrong, from both a professional and SA standpoint. Runnels only elaborated this during the speaking out movement in 2020. Lesnar, still a major figure in WWE at the time, faced intense scrutiny. WWE issued a statement affirming their zero-tolerance policy for SA, though no official disciplinary action was confirmed. And up next, we have JBL shoots on the Blue Meanie. At ECW One Night Stand 2005, the atmosphere was electric as ECW originals clashed with WWE talent in a chaotic post-show brawl. But things took a turn for the worse when JBL, known for his stiff in-ring style and backstage bullying, legitimately targeted the Blue Meanie during the melee. With no script or warning, JBL began throwing real stiff punches, reopening a nasty cut on the Meanie's forehead, leaving him in a bloody mess. The animosity reportedly stemmed from an interview that the Blue Meanie did a few years prior, where he said that JBL was a bully. JBL used the unscripted chaos of the brawl as an opportunity to settle the score, turning what was supposed to be a worked fight into a brutal shoot. And up next, we have Chavo Guerrero cheating. In March of 2011, Chavo Guerrero Jr. allegedly started texting his friend Drew McIntyre, boasting that he had slept with a woman other than his wife of then 13 years. To prove his boast, he texted a picture of the woman's thong panties as a trophy. Drew McIntyre responded by jokingly saying that he was playing with himself in the gym over the pic. Apparently, Drew's then wife, Taryn Terrell, discovered the text on Drew's phone and in a moment of rage, posted the conversation on her Twitter feed. Drew and Taryn eventually got a divorce, and despite Chavo's alleged admittance to infidelity, is still married to his wife. And up next we have Trish Stratus and Lillian Garcia's secret lesbian relationship. It's been rumored before that former WWE ring announcer Lillian Garcia and WWE Hall of Famer Trish Stratus were once more than just friends. It all allegedly took place in 2000, when both Lillian and Trish Stratus were relatively new to the WWE. Both were apparently spotted at an appearance together and holding hands, which is not a big deal at all, but then rumors started to swirl around that they were spotted kissing at a club not long after that. Considering the different climate back in 2000, it was allegedly not looked upon positively by the male-dominated locker room, and both were ostracized for the alleged affair. To further fuel those rumors, The Rock once conducted an interview with Lillian Garcia on SmackDown. In the interview, The Rock said he knew Garcia liked pie. As Rock fans know, pie meant a woman's private part in Rock code. The couple allegedly split up due to pressure from management, but still remained good friends. And up next we have Curt Hennig death. Curt Hennig, better known as Mr. Perfect, was one of the most naturally gifted wrestlers to ever step into the ring. But by the early 2000s, years of injuries, pain, and the wrestling lifestyle had taken their toll. Hennig struggled with addiction, using a mix of painkillers, roids, and recreational drugs to cope. His once legendary career was winding down, and while he was still making appearances, he was no longer the same Mr. Perfect that fans once knew. Then, on February 10, 2003, tragedy struck. Hennig was found dead in his Florida hotel room at just 44 years old. The official cause was acute coke intoxication. However, his father, Larry the Axe Hennig, later stated that roids and painkillers also played a role in his death. The wrestling world mourned the loss of a true great, but the reality was all too familiar. Another case of substance abuse and a body pushed past its limits. Hennig, though, was eventually inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2007. And up next we have Alexa Bliss stalker. In 2023, WWE superstar Alexa Bliss became the target of a chilling harassment involving an obsessive stalker. This individual was so fixated on her that he began harassing both Alexa and her fiancé online, claiming that they were already married and sending multiple accounts of menacing message over an extended period of time. His behavior escalated to a frightening level as he created multiple social media accounts to evade blocks. He also sent cryptic texts implying he was warning her fiancé about perceived threats from someone else, all part of his twisted narrative that only he believed. His online activity reportedly matched patterns seen in previous stalking cases within WWE, raising alarm about the very real risks female superstars face. Alexa appeared to have addressed the situation calmly, but the gravity of the ordeal is unmistakable. And up next we have Chris Benoit removed from SmackDown vs. Raw 2008. During the development of SmackDown vs. Raw 2008, Chris Benoit was originally planned as a playable character, but following the horrific events of June of 2007, he was swiftly removed from the game. While Benoit was erased from the official roster, his character data remained buried within the game's code, a lingering remnant of what could have been. There has long been speculation that Benoit was meant to be one of the game's cover stars. This theory makes sense. SmackDown vs. Raw was designed to highlight ECW, and Benoit was scheduled to win the ECW championship the very weekend when tragedy struck. With Benoit's removal, Bobby Lashley took his place as ECW's representative on the cover, despite having significantly less star power than Benoit at the time. Had things played out differently, Benoit could have been on the front cover that was distributed to millions of people. This is a chilling thought considering what would soon unfold. And up next we have the Maria Kanellis leaks. Maria Kanellis is a professional wrestler who has wrestled for several different promotions, but in 2017, she experienced a privacy breach when unauthorized, not safe for work photos and videos of her leaked online. This incident was part of a larger wave of similar breaches affecting several female wrestlers around that time. In response to the leak, Maria Kanellis addressed the situation publicly, expressing her distress and emphasizing the violation of her privacy. She urged fans to respect her and her family's privacy during the challenging period. And up next we have Booker T's criminal past. Booker T might very well be the most successful African American wrestler of all time. The 5-time WCW champion went on to win major accolades not only in WCW but also some of the biggest titles in WWE later on. However, not many people know much about Booker's past and how far he's come since then. In his youth, he was involved in a string of serious crimes, including multiple armed robberies. In 1987, Booker was arrested after attempting to rob a Wendy's restaurant, the same one he was working at. Police suspected it was an inside job and arrested him along with several accomplices. Booker ended up serving 19 months in prison and was released on parole. Many would have expected him to continue down that same dark path, but luckily he found wrestling and the rest is history. And up next we have Randy Orton overdose. In 2006, Randy Orton was one of WWE's fastest rising stars, but behind the scenes, he was spiraling. Years of abusing painkillers and sleeping meds caught up to him one night when he accidentally overdosed alone in a hotel room. In his own chilling words, he said this: "I was gonna kill myself. I hate myself for it, you know? But it didn't make me want to stop. I woke up in a hospital one morning because I had accidentally overdosed on some sleeping medications. Randy's wife was the one who found him unconscious and called for help, just in time. Doctors later told him that if she had arrived even a few minutes later, he likely would have died." Following the overdose, Orton was suspended for 60 days under WWE's wellness policy and sent to rehab. It became a turning point in his life and career, helping him get clean and eventually find stability. And up next you have Screwed, the Bret Hart story, lost media. After releasing The Self-Destruction of the Ultimate Warrior, a DVD that infamously buried Warrior more than celebrated him, WWE initially planned to do something similar with Bret Hart. Their next target was a documentary titled Screwed, the Bret Hart story, intended to paint Bret in a negative light following his controversial exit from the company. WWE recorded exclusive interviews for this version of the documentary, featuring people like Shawn Michaels, Jerry Lawler, and Hulk Hogan, many of whom spoke negatively about Bret. However, WWE eventually decided to change course. The negative portrayal was scrapped, and instead, they reworked the project into a more respectful documentary that portrayed Bret in a much more positive light. To this day, the original interviews and footage recorded specifically for Screwed, the Bret Hart story have never been released to the public, and now that Bret Hart has reconciled with WWE and made peace with several wrestlers who once criticized him, it's highly unlikely that WWE will ever make that original footage available. And up next we have the tragedy of Test. Andrew Test Martin had all the makings of a top star. The look, the size, and the in-ring ability, standing in at 6'6" with a chiseled physique. But while his career had promise, his lack of charisma and mic skills kept him from breaking into the main event scene. Throughout his career, Test also had substance abuse problems, and in 2009, those problems would come to a head. On March 13, 2009, Test was found dead in his apartment in Tampa, Florida at just 33 years old. The cause was an overdose of oxycodone. Later, Test showed that he suffered from severe CTE, the same brain condition linked to repeated head trauma in contact sports. It was clear that years of punishment in the ring had taken a toll not just on his body, but on his mind as well. And up next we have Alberto Del Rio abusing women. In 2016, when Alberto Del Rio was in WWE, he made his relationship with WWE superstar Paige public, but the two quickly became known for being one of the most toxic couples in wrestling history. Around the time they got engaged, Del Rio and Paige were involved in a public domestic dispute at an Orlando international airport, where a witness claimed Del Rio had roughed her up. The couple eventually called off their engagement, and in the years that followed, Paige opened up about the dark reality of their relationship. She stated that she was often trapped in her room for 6 to 7 hours, getting physically assaulted every few minutes. She described trying to fight back, but said it became a cycle of daily abuse. Years after his relationship with Paige ended, Del Rio began dating another woman, but on 9 May 2020, he was arrested, this time for allegedly battering and SAing this woman. According to reports, Del Rio held her captive for hours and abused her. This lady also claimed that he smashed her phone and laptop and even tried to burn her passport to prevent her from leaving. A grand jury in Texas indicted Del Rio on 1 count of aggravated kidnapping and 4 counts of SA. He was facing the possibility of life in prison, but the charges were ultimately dropped about a year later. And up next we have the Finn Balor fake injury conspiracy theory. In 2016, just 1 month after being called up to the main roster, Finn Balor defeated Seth Rollins at SummerSlam to become the inaugural WWE Universal Champion. However, just 22 hours after his victory, he was forced to relinquish the title due to a reported shoulder injury. But not everyone bought the official story. Some fans believed it was all part of a plan concocted by Vince McMahon. According to this conspiracy theory, Balor wasn't actually injured. Instead, Vince forced him to give up the belt because he didn't see him as a long-term top guy. These theorists argue that Vince only made Balor a champion as a favor to Triple H, who was heavily pushing NXT talent at the time and wanted to see Balor succeed on the main roster. Supporters of this theory also point to Vince's alleged preference for larger, more physically imposing wrestlers, the so-called big sweaty men archetype, which Balor didn't fit. Plus, Balor's reputation as a top star in New Japan Pro Wrestling may have worked against him in Vince's eyes, as McMahon historically hasn't been fond of pushing talent who found success in other promotions first. And up next we have Dawn Marie fired while pregnant. WWE has gone through many changes over the years, but some of its darker moments still linger, like the controversial firing of former ECW and WWE star Dawn Marie. In 2005, while pregnant, Dawn Marie was shockingly released from her WWE contract. The company has long hidden behind the independent contractor label to justify questionable decisions, but this was seen as a new low. Vince McMahon showed no loyalty or compassion, cutting ties with her simply because she was unable to perform in the ring due to her pregnancy. The firing sparked major backlash, with fans and fellow wrestlers outside WWE speaking up in support of Marie, who was considered a well-liked and respected figure in the industry. The move was widely considered as one of the most heartless firings in WWE history. Dawn Marie later took legal action against WWE for terminating her while pregnant. The case was eventually settled out of court, with reports suggesting that Vince McMahon had to pay a hefty sum to make things right. And up next we have the Randy Orton tattoo lawsuit. Randy Orton's body is a canvas. His ink is as much part of his wrestling identity as the RKO itself. But in 2018, those tattoos became the center of a strange legal storm that blurred the line between body art and intellectual property. Catherine Alexander, the tattoo artist who inked many of Orton's most iconic designs throughout the 2000s, filed a lawsuit against WWE and the makers of the WWE 2K video games. Her claim? That she owned the rights to the artwork, and WWE had digitally recreated her designs on Orton's in-game character without her consent. What followed was a 4-year legal battle that raised bizarre questions about who truly owns the art on a person's skin. In the end, Alexander was awarded just $4,600 in damages, a surprisingly low sum for something that could have changed how tattoos are treated in media forever. And up next we have the Jim Duggan and Iron Sheik arrest. Hacksaw Jim Duggan and the Iron Sheik may have played bitter enemies on TV, but behind the scenes, they were actually very good friends who often traveled together. Since they were feuding on screen, they tried to keep their friendship under wraps, knowing that being seen together would break kayfabe, which was still taken very seriously at the time. But that secret couldn't be kept for long. In May of 1987, Duggan was driving himself and the Iron Sheik to a WWE event in New Jersey when a state trooper noticed Duggan drinking a beer while driving. He was pulled over, and Duggan, being honest, admitted to having a small amount of marijuana in the car. This prompted the officer to search the vehicle, and that's when things spiraled out of control. Unbeknownst to Duggan, the Iron Sheik had cocaine in his luggage. Both men were arrested on the spot. Duggan was quickly released, but the Iron Sheik was hit with a felony drug charge and later released on bail. The news spread fast, and it completely shattered the illusion of kayfabe. So when fans found out the two fierce rivals were not only traveling together but also doing drugs, the fallout was massive. WWE had no choice but to act. Both Duggan and the Iron Sheik were suspended and later fired, but by then, the damage was done. The curtain had been pulled back and the fans would never look at the wrestling business the same way again. And up next we have the Roddy Piper kills Rick McGraw conspiracy theory. In late 1985, on an episode of WWF Championship Wrestling, Roddy Piper absolutely demolished the enhancement talent Rick Quick Draw McGraw in a squash match. The beating was stiff, vicious, and personal. Piper was rabid, treating McGraw like a crash test dummy in front of the world. But just days later, Rick McGraw was dead, as he was found unresponsive in his home. The official cause? A heart attack, but fans weren't buying it. Here's where it gets weird. The match with Piper had actually been taped weeks before, yet it aired just before McGraw's death, creating the illusion that Piper had beaten a man to death on live television. Wrestling was deep in the kayfabe era, and to fans, the lines between reality and storyline were razor thin. Rumors spread like wildfire, and fans began asking the unthinkable. Did Roddy Piper kill Rick McGraw? And up next we have Rocky Sr., a serial cheater. Former pro wrestler and the father of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Rocky Johnson, had a rocky relationship with his wife, Ada Molina, during their 25-year marriage. Their marriage was a very turbulent one, as Rocky carried on several affairs while traveling on the road. It was alleged that Rocky had one affair that lasted for nearly as long as his marriage to Ada, with a woman by the name of Luann Crable. A 15-year-old Dwayne Johnson found out all about the affair and allegedly stole one of Crable's credit cards and fraudulently charged over $3,000 of it. Ada became so depressed and upset over Rocky's infidelities that she allegedly tried to take her own life. According to The Rock, his parents had a huge verbal fight over Rocky's mistresses that caused Ada to get out of the car she was in with Johnson. It was her teenage son Dwayne who helped pull her off the road and to safety. There was also an incident where Rocky slept with a 19-year-old girl from one of his stops in the Tennessee territory. Rocky was arrested on an allegation of R-word, but those charges were eventually dismissed. Rocky and Atta finally divorced in 2008. And up next we have the tragedy of Mike Awesome. Mike Awesome was a powerhouse wrestler who redefined what a big man could do in the ring. Standing in at 6'6" and over 290 pounds, he wasn't just a brute, he was athletic, fast, and had a cruiserweight moveset. By 2006, Mike Awesome had retired from the business and transitioned into real estate, but at the same time, his personal life was falling apart. His marriage, something he believed was stable, was crumbling without him realizing it. Then one day in 2007, his wife dropped a bombshell that she was leaving him. This news shattered Mike Awesome, and in the heat of the moment, he allegedly did some domestic violence on his wife. She called the police and Awesome was arrested. While in jail, he called his wife, only to hear the final blow, that she was divorcing him, taking their 2 children and leaving him with nothing. When Awesome was released from jail, he returned home to a devastating sight. His house was nearly empty, many of his personal belongings destroyed or thrown away. Reports also claimed that his wife had even disposed of some of his most valuable possessions, leaving him completely alone and lost. And on February 17, 2007, Mike Awesome killed himself in his home. He was only 42 years old. And up next we have Jake the Snake Roberts blackmails Vince McMahon at WrestleMania 8. Backstage politics are nothing new in wrestling, but what Jake the Snake Roberts pulled at WrestleMania 8? That was next level. Jake had already grown frustrated with his spot in the company. He wanted a backstage role after Pat Patterson stepped down, and when Vince passed him over, the writing was on the wall. Jake wanted out, but Vince wouldn't let him go. So Jake waited, and right before his scheduled match with The Undertaker at WrestleMania 8, on the night of the show, he blackmailed Vince McMahon by saying, "Give me my release or I'm not walking through that curtain." Vince was trapped. With thousands in the arena and millions watching at home, he couldn't afford a no-show. Jake had him, and just like that, Vince gave in. Jake got his written release on the spot, right before walking out to put over The Undertaker in what would be his final appearance in WWE at the time. Roberts knew WCW was waiting with a contract. He had leverage, and he used it. He finished the match like a pro, then walked away from the WWE on his own terms. And up next we have the Sid Vicious Squall. Life on the road can drive a man mad, especially in the wrestling world of the 80s and 90s. Sid Vicious, already known for his unpredictable behavior, was no stranger to the mental toll of non-stop travel. Looking for companionship, Sid made a strange decision. Instead of a dog or a cat, he adopted a squirrel. No one knows where he got it, but Sid had one, and he brought it with him everywhere. Backstage, in the locker room, and on the road. The animal was reportedly treated like a loyal pet, until the day things got out of hand. In what's become one of wrestling's most bizarre backstage stories, Sid was dared by fellow wrestlers to drop the squirrel down in his pants, a twisted rib that took a dark turn fast, because within seconds, the squirrel did what squirrels do best. It went for the nuts. Sid allegedly screamed in pain as the creature clawed and bit at him. He ripped his pants open, and what was waiting for him was a wound that was so bad that Sid had to be rushed to the hospital. He allegedly received multiple stitches and a round of rabies shots. The incident has never been officially confirmed, but it circulated for years in locker room whispers. And up next we have Vader attacks TV host in Kuwait. Vader is known for his legendary runs in Japan and WCW, where he won the WCW World Heavyweight Championship 3 times and the IWGP Heavyweight Championship another 3 times. However, during his time in the WWF, he got into some legal trouble overseas, specifically in Kuwait. While appearing on a talk show, things went sideways fast. During what was supposed to be a kayfabe moment, the Kuwaiti host asked Vader the infamous question, "Is wrestling fake?" Vader immediately flipped the table, grabbed the host by his tie, and violently jerked him around and asking him if wrestling was fake. Vader claimed that he was simply playing out a scripted segment as instructed by Jerry Briscoe, but apparently the host wasn't in on the act, and the situation quickly escalated. Vader ended up being arrested and later convicted of assault. Fortunately for him, he got off with just a $166 fine, but the incident has since become one of the most surreal international moments in wrestling history. And up next, we have Marty Jannetty gets inappropriate with his alleged daughter. In 2014, Marty Jannetty revealed to the world on social media that he had a long-lost daughter that he never knew about. After a few years of trying to bond with his daughter, Jannetty apparently went through with a DNA test, and as it turned out, the DNA test revealed that Jannetty and the girl were not father and daughter. What makes the situation so bizarre was that in the summer of 2017, Jannetty went on social media again, and this time he asked all of his friends and followers if it was okay to fornicate with this girl now that the two aren't related by blood. Marty at the time was 57 years old and the girl in question was 22. And up next we have William Regal smuggled roids from Egypt and India. Before becoming one of WWE's most respected veterans and on-screen authority figures, William Regal lived a darker life behind the curtains, one filled with addiction, deception, and risk. In the early 90s, during his time touring globally as a wrestler, Regal wasn't just carrying boots and gear in his luggage. In his own words, he was smuggling roids across international borders. While performing overseas, Regal once flew out of India with 50 vials of juice hidden in his bag. He confessed to making several similar runs, even smuggling substances from Egypt, all while under the radar. Regal claimed he did this without thinking twice, so deep in addiction and ego that consequences didn't register. But he got lucky. No arrests, no scandals, just near misses. These stories stayed buried until Regal casually recounted them on a podcast years later. And up next we have the Dynamite Kid, Scandals. The Dynamite Kid is considered one of the greatest wrestlers to ever come out of the UK. He was one half of the iconic 1980s tag team, alongside his cousin Davey Boy Smith. But while he was celebrated in the ring, behind the scenes, he was despised by many of his colleagues. According to numerous wrestlers, and even his own brother-in-law, Bret the Hitman Hart, the Dynamite Kid was one of the biggest a-holes backstage. He had a reputation for bullying and constantly pulling obnoxious and cruel pranks. One infamous example involved him putting sleeping pills in another wrestler's drink and then taking a shit in the man's bag. His aggressive attitude frequently led to fights in the locker room. Eventually, his life started to spiral. He was fired from WWE, suffered a severe back injury, and struggled with alcoholism. His personal life turned even darker. Apparently, he constantly physically abused his wife. His constant abuse pushed his wife to the brink, to the point where she reportedly considered taking her own life and her children's lives just to escape the nightmare. Eventually, the couple separated, but by then, Dynamite's career and body were ruined. Without the roids, he was nearly unrecognizable. In 1996, he became paralyzed and was confined to a wheelchair for the rest of his life. He passed away in 2018, a broken man with a legacy as tragic as it was influential. And up next we have Gable Steveson controversy. WWE had massive plans for Gable Steveson, Olympic gold medalist, NCAA wrestling phenom, and a physical blueprint that had people calling him the next Kurt Angle, all before he even wrestled a match. At WrestleMania 38, he was introduced to the world by Stephanie McMahon herself, front and center on the biggest stage possible. Later that night, he got physical, laying out Chad Gable and celebrating with the babyfaces, teasing a future star-making run. But there was a certain section of fans who did not like Gable at all from day one, because Steveson had a highly publicized R-word allegation dating back to 2019. The case went to court but was dropped due to lack of evidence and specific Minnesota laws involving intoxication and consent. But the internet never forgot, and every time Steveson appeared on TV, that story followed him. Despite the allegations being dismissed, the backlash on WWE's social media made things increasingly difficult. He was then quietly moved to NXT, but there things only got worse, with these matches being below expectations. WWE eventually released Gable Steveson, ending one of the most high-profile flameouts in wrestling history. And up next we have the death of Dino Bravo. Dino Bravo was a Canadian wrestling icon, a powerhouse who dominated the Canadian wrestling scene in the 1970s before making his mark in WWE. But while his in-ring career made him a legend in Canada, his life after wrestling is where things went wrong. By the early 1990s, Bravo had retired and settled into life outside of the ring, training up-and-coming wrestlers in Montreal. However, training wrestlers didn't provide the financial security he needed, and rumors began circulating that Bravo had turned to illegal cigarette smuggling, a highly lucrative but dangerous business controlled by the mafia. And then on March 10, 1993, Dino Bravo was found dead in his home, shot 11 times. The brutal nature of the attack left no doubt. This was a targeted hit. Shortly before his death, Bravo reportedly confided in Bret the Hitman Hart, telling him that he knew his days were numbered. But despite speculation to his connections to organized crime, no one has ever been formally charged or arrested for his murder. And now we're moving down the iceberg into Tier 5, with our first entry on Tier 5 being Edge's controversial choke spot at WrestleMania 36. WrestleMania 36 was already in uncharted territory. No fans, no arena, just 2 nights of wrestling inside WWE's Performance Center due to the pandemic. But for Edge, it was supposed to be a moment of redemption. His first singles match in nearly a decade, battling Randy Orton in a brutal last man standing match. But what they got instead was backlash. As the match spilled throughout the PC, the two ended up brawling inside the gym, and that's where the moment happened. Edge was choked by a weight cable by Orton in a gritty, violent spot that would have been forgotten in any other context, but for some watching, it hit too close to home. According to Dave Meltzer, people inside WWE were genuinely disturbed by the spot due to its eerie resemblance to the Chris Benoit tragedy, where Benoit himself using a weight cable in his own gym. It wasn't just a dark parallel, it was personal and reopened wounds that hadn't healed. Even fans called this out. Combine that with the match's bloated runtime, and what should have been an emotional return turned into one of the most criticized matches of the weekend. Long, awkward, and one moment deeply uncomfortable. And up next we have Charlotte Flair's racist tirade. Back in 2017, Charlotte Flair was involved in a DUI traffic stop in Texas. Recently, her ex-boyfriend filed a lawsuit claiming that Charlotte went into a hailstorm of racist insults during the stop. No screenshots or clips have ever leaked, but the suit alleges video proof exists of Charlotte using racially charged language against the officer involved. The lawsuit was ultimately dismissed without any footage ever being released, and WWE made no official statement, and Charlotte Flair is still a top face in the company. And up next we have the Brandi Rhodes leaks. The husband and wife duo of Cody Rhodes and Brandi Rhodes have been together for a long time, wrestling across several different promotions. In 2014, while they were both employed by WWE, Cody as an active wrestler and Brandi a ring announcer known as Eden Styles, a huge incident took place where Brandi Rhodes' nudes were leaked. The leaks of Brandi showed several nude photos of herself in the mirror. And up next we have Umaga shoots on Steve-O. In 2006, Jackass stars Steve-O and Chris Pontius made a guest appearance on WWE Raw, and things quickly spiraled out of control. They were scheduled for a lighthearted segment, and the duo entered the ring to taunt Umaga, who was booked as an unstoppable savage force at the time. Umaga attacked them, and while Pontius sold Umaga's attack properly, Steve-O, true to his daredevil persona, didn't take the segment seriously. After being slammed to the mat, he kept laughing and no-selling Umaga's offense, which is a major sign of disrespect in wrestling. Umaga, a seasoned pro with little tolerance for that kind of behavior, didn't take it lightly. He snapped and turned the segment into a full-on shoot, legitimately beating down Steve-O with stiff shots and real aggression. Steve-O quickly realized that the situation had turned serious, but by then, Umaga was in full beast mode. Umaga pummeled Steve-O into a blackout with extremely stiff elbows, after Steve-O kept on moving around rather than seeming knocked out. The segment was eventually cut off, but the damage was done, literally. And up next we have Hulk Hogan and Brutus Beefcake's secret affair. Hulk Hogan and Brutus Beefcake were known to be close friends both inside and outside of the wrestling world. Their friendship dated back to the early days of their careers, and they were often seen working together in promotions like WWE and WCW. Because of their long-standing camaraderie and Beefcake's frequent appearances in Hogan-related storylines, some speculated about the nature of their relationship, leading to rumors that they were in a secret homo relationship. These rumors got inflamed by Hulk Hogan's ex-wife Linda in a 2011 memoir, Wrestling the Hulk, My Life Against the Ropes, where she accused Hogan and Brutus Beefcake being in a gay relationship. Hogan vehemently denied the accusations, and it turns out that he was telling the truth because Linda later came out and said that she actually lied about the accusations, and she even apologized to the Hulkster for making them up. And up next we have MVP tries to attack Triple H with a screwdriver. One of the more underground wrestling conspiracies centers around a rumored backstage altercation between MVP and Triple H. At the height of MVP's WWE run in the mid-2000s, when he was holding the US title and gaining momentum, There were whispers of serious personal beef between him and Triple H. According to this long circulating rumor, MVP once confronted Triple H during a heated exchange and at some point allegedly attempted to go in at him with a screwdriver. The altercation was supposedly quickly shut down, buried by WWE management, and never spoken of publicly again. There's no documented evidence, no official reports or confirmations, but the incident has lived on in hushed tones across forums and backstage whispers. It's no coincidence that despite MVP's popularity and skill, his push stalled in WWE, and he eventually left WWE altogether. And up next we have the death of Shad Gaspard. Shad Gaspard was best known as one half of Crime Time in WWE, and he was charismatic, powerful, and beloved by fans. However, on May 17, 2020, Shad and his 10-year-old son were swimming at Venice Beach, Los Angeles, when a powerful rip current pulled them and a group of swimmers into deeper waters. Lifeguards rushed in, trying to save as many people as they could. As the waves crashed around them, Shad made a split-second decision. He told the lifeguards to save his own son first. That decision cost him his life. When Shad's son was pulled to safety, a massive wave struck Shad, dragging him beneath the surface. He never resurfaced, and for 2 days, search teams, fellow wrestlers, and the Coast Guard scoured the ocean, but hope faded. Then, on May 20, his body washed ashore, confirming the worst. Shad Gaspard was gone at just 39 years old. His death was devastating, but his final moments cemented his legacy as a father first and foremost. His widow later filed a lawsuit against the state of California and the city of Los Angeles, claiming negligence and a lack of warning signs about the dangers of swimming there. In 2022, WWE posthumously awarded him the Warrior Award, recognizing his bravery and selflessness. And up next we have the escapades of the Ultimate Warrior, Jake the Snake, and Jim Powers. A group of WWE wrestlers that allegedly consisted of Jim Powers, Jake the Snake Roberts, and the Ultimate Warrior went to a brothel called the Mustang Ranch in Nevada back in the day. When they arrived, they were allegedly immediately noticed by all of the female workers and were swarmed by them wanting to party with the pro wrestlers. This angered many of the other patrons who were being ignored by the workers. The madam of the place had to step in and break up the crowd to keep business going. She supposedly handed each wrestler a voucher of sorts to go into a back room with a female free of charge. The Ultimate Warrior was allegedly insulted by the offer and refused the voucher, saying that he had a lot of money and didn't need a handout. Jake Roberts allegedly grabbed Warrior's voucher for himself. The Ultimate Warrior would later sit at the house's bar with a woman he had an interest in, and allegedly tried to convince the woman to leave with him and go back to his hotel room, instead of doing the boom boom inside of the establishment. The madam had to step in once again and refuse Warrior's request. The other wrestlers supposedly felt that the Warrior was just miserable and no longer had him go out and party with them again. And up next we have the Lex Luger screwed himself out of a WWE Championship conspiracy theory. Lex Luger seemed destined for greatness in WWF. He was practically Vince McMahon's ideal superstar. When Hulk Hogan departed the company in 1993, Vince McMahon handpicked Luger as the new All-American hero. It genuinely felt like Luger was being groomed to be WWF champion. According to long-standing conspiracy theories though, the plan was for Luger to win the WWF championship at WrestleMania 10. Allegedly, once Luger was informed of his upcoming title win, he went out drinking at a bar and ended up bragging to random people that he'd be winning the belt at the showcase of the Immortals. When word got back to WWE officials, Vince McMahon reportedly scrapped the plan out of frustration and handed the moment and the title to Bret Hart instead. Luger has denied the story over the years, but it's not an outlandish theory. After all, it wouldn't be the first time backstage leaks caused major changes. Even the outcome of the 1997 Royal Rumble was altered because Vince Russo spilled the planned finish. Whether it's fact or folklore, many fans still believe that Lex Luger talked himself out of history. And up next we have Kurt Angle's stalker. In 2003, Kurt Angle and his family were terrorized by a woman named Dean Sidon, who became fixated on the wrestling star. According to Angle, the situation escalated severely, and it got to the point where she was even terrorizing his family. Police reports reveal that Sidon followed Angle's schedule across the country, called his wife with death threats, and even interfered with hotel bookings and travel plans. At one point, she left messages claiming that she was expecting Angle's child. She was finally arrested and briefly detained, and Angle says that he was relieved when it happened. And up next we have the WWE 2K15 Chris Benoit ban. When WWE 2K15 was released, players who attempted to recreate Chris Benoit in community creations were met with an unexpected consequence. Their accounts were banned. The controversy first surfaced when a Twitter user questioned why their account had been suspended. The response from 2K's community manager was blunt. They had uploaded a Chris Benoit creation, violating WWE's strict policy on erasing him from WWE history. And since 2K15 was an officially licensed WWE product, it had to comply with the company's ongoing effort to ensure Benoit's name, likeness, and legacy never appeared in their games ever again. This zero-tolerance approach didn't last forever though, as in later WWE games, the policy quickly shifted. Instead of banning players outright, 2K simply began removing any Benoit-related content from community creations. The punishment wasn't as harsh, but the message was still clear. Chris Benoit was a name that WWE wanted buried, erased, and forgotten. And up next we have Bull Nakano fired for coke possession. Bull Nakano wasn't just another wrestler, she was a trailblazing force known for her distinctive hair, face paint, and dominance in the women's division. After capturing the WWF Women's Championship in Tokyo in late 1994, she held it until April 1995, but shortly after dropping the title, WWE quietly cut ties with her. This was because Nakano was found in possession of coke and was fired. There was no press conference, no tribute show, nothing. She vanished from programming without a word. At the time, the women's division was already fading away, and Nakano's scandal only deepened the demise. Though the charges were serious and her departure abrupt, many fans have since reconnected with Nakano's legacy. She was even inducted in the WWE Hall of Fame in 2024. And up next we have the tragedy of Crash Holly. Crash Holly was one of WWF's most entertaining underdogs, bringing energy, humor, and chaos to the hardcore championship scene during the Attitude Era. But behind the fun-loving persona, Crash Holly was fighting a battle that no one could see. After leaving WWE in 2003, his life took a dark turn. He went through a divorce from his wife, which sent him into a deep depression. As the wrestling world moved on, Crash struggled with drug abuse and alcohol, and his mental state continued to deteriorate. Then on November 6, 2003, Crash Holly was found dead at the home of his friend, wrestler Stevie Richards. The cause was a drug overdose combined with alcohol, and later his death was ruled as a He was just 32 years old. And up next we have the Shane McMahon helicopter crash. In July of 2017, WWE's Shane O'Mac, son of Vince McMahon and risk-taking on-screen performer, survived a terrifying incident. His helicopter made an emergency water landing in the Atlantic Ocean near Gilgo Beach, Long Island. Here's how it went down. The chopper took off from Westchester County Airport, then suddenly experienced engine trouble mid-air. The pilot issued a mayday, and the aircraft landed hard in the water. Lifeguards and kayaks and the Coast Guard responded swiftly. Thankfully, both Shane and the pilot were rescued, uninjured. A witness on the beach described a big splash, with rescuers rushing toward the bobbing helicopter to carry Shane and the pilot ashore. Though miraculously unhurt, the crash was scary and dramatic for a McMahon to survive intact, because if they were in another place and there was no water below them, Shane McMahon very well could have died that day. And up next we have Damian Priest cheating. WWE star and former World Heavyweight Champion Damian Priest has been accused by an ex-girlfriend of cheating on her. The twist to the story is that the girlfriend stated on social media that Priest not only cheated on her, but did so with two of her sisters. The ex-girlfriend made the accusation and added a series of texts that were allegedly of Priest and his sisters. Damian Priest did not acknowledge the situation with any statement. And up next we have MVP's criminal past. Before becoming a star in WWE, MVP's life could have taken a drastically different path. At just 12 years old, he joined a street gang, which led to a 6-month stint in juvenile detention following a robbery, but things only escalated from there. As a teenager, MVP, real name Hassan Hamin Assad, was involved in a series of armed robberies and kidnappings, resulting in an 18-year prison sentence. He ultimately served 9.5 years due to good behavior before being released. While many would have been swallowed by that past, MVP turned his life around, rising through the ranks to debut in WWE in 2005 with a flashy, unique gimmick that made him one of the standout mid-carders of his era. Despite his success, the shadows of his past still follow him. Due to his criminal record, MVP remains banned from entering several countries, a fact that has impacted his international wrestling career to this day. And up next we have the Kemper and Mr. Saito arrest. Kemper and Mr. Saito were both stars in the World Wrestling Federation during the 80s, but in 1984, their careers took a wild detour. While traveling together in Wisconsin, they stopped at a McDonald's late at night. When they were denied service for arriving after hours, Kemper allegedly became enraged and threw a boulder through the restaurant's window. The two wrestlers then returned to their hotel, but the situation didn't end there. Police officers soon arrived at their hotel room, and a violent altercation broke out. Patera and Saito physically assaulted the officers and were promptly arrested. Both men were charged with battery of a police officer and sentenced to 2 years in prison. Due to good behavior, they only served 18 months, but the incident remains one of the most bizarre and damaging scandals in wrestling history. And up next we have DX rides a tank, Mandela effect. Ask almost any wrestling fan today about the Monday Night Wars, and one of the things that they'll bring up is when D-Generation X invaded WCW's Monday Nitro. In their minds, it's crystal clear. D-Generation X riding in on a tank, heading straight toward enemy territory. The imagery feels larger than life, iconic and undeniable. But here's the thing, it never happened, because DX never rode a tank. They pulled up in a Jeep, a regular Jeep with a toy cannon strapped on top. No treads, no heavy machinery. Yet today, countless fans vividly remember it as a full-blown military tank. Maybe the rebellious spirit of DX made the moment feel bigger than it was, or maybe, somewhere in a different version of reality, they really did roll up in a tank. And up next we have promoters plotting to kill Vince McMahon. In the early days of WWE's meteoric expansion, Vince McMahon wasn't just shaking up wrestling, he was making enemies. The sport was territory-based. Local promoters had iron-fisted control over their regions, and when Vince began invading them in the 80s, resentment grew into real hostility. According to Jim Ross, he was once in a bathroom and overheard promoters like Bill Watts and others from the NWA promotion group plotting on how they were going to kill Vince McMahon. It made Jim Ross literally stifle himself in the stall to avoid being found. And it was real talk, not kayfabe banter. Vince also himself later confirmed on the Pat McAfee show that those promoters genuinely brought up assassination as a solution. All of this just makes you wonder, if those other promoters had been successful, how would wrestling look today? And up next we have Jeff Hardy removed from SmackDown Here Comes the Pain. Jeff Hardy was everywhere in 2003. On WWE programming, in storylines, and even in the trailer for the video game SmackDown Here Comes the Pain. Fans naturally expected him to be a playable character in what would become one of the most legendary wrestling video games of all time. But when the game hit stores, Hardy had vanished. No entrance, no character model, not even a hidden unlockable. The truth behind his removal paints a sad picture. Hardy had been released by WWE just months before the game's launch. Behind the scenes, his battles with substance abuse, unreliability, and missed appearances had reached a boiling point. WWE made the decision to cut ties, and in turn, the game developers had to cut Jeff Hardy from the final roster, even though his presence was already teased in promotional material. His sudden erasure became one of the strangest mysteries in wrestling video game history. And up next we have the tragedy of Chris Kanyon. Chris Kanyon was one of the most underrated wrestlers of his time. With his willingness to push boundaries, he entertained millions, but behind the scenes, Kanyon was fighting a deep personal battle. Kanyon struggled with bipolar disorder, a condition that caused severe mood swings and bouts of depression. He kept much of his personal turmoil hidden, but the weight of his struggles grew heavier over the years. One of Kanyon's biggest personal conflicts was with his sexuality. At a time when being openly gay in wrestling was almost unheard of, Kanyon kept his truth a secret, fearing how it would affect his career. When he eventually came out backstage, he claimed that WWE had held him back because of this, though some disputed this. Still, the isolation, the industry's rejection, and his ongoing mental health struggles took their toll. In the weeks leading up to April 2, 2010, Kanyon spoke openly about himself, but many hoped he was just venting. Then, his worst fears became reality when Kanyon's brother found him dead, having killed himself at just 40 years old. And up next we have the DiBiase family embezzlement scandal. The DiBiase name was once associated with championship gold and million-dollar charisma. Ted DiBiase Sr., the million-dollar man, was one of WWE's most iconic heels, a man who lived the lavish gimmick both in and out of the ring. His sons, Ted Jr. and Brett, followed in his footsteps, but what began as a proud wrestling legacy has since been tainted by one of the biggest fraud cases in wrestling history. In 2022, the Mississippi Department of Human Services filed a massive lawsuit against the DiBiase family. The allegation? They helped embezzle over $3 million in federal welfare funds from the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, which was money meant to help the poorest families in Mississippi. Between 2017 and 2019, Ted DiBiase Jr.'s companies reportedly received more than $3 million from this fund. His father, Ted Sr., and his brother Brett also allegedly received hundreds of thousands through various services that were never actually performed. These weren't just accounting errors, this was an organized scheme. The most serious charges were aimed at Ted DiBiase Jr., who faces 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, 6 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of theft concerning programs receiving federal funds, and 4 counts of money laundering. If convicted on all counts, Ted DiBiase Jr. could be sentenced to over 100 years in prison. The case remains ongoing, and wrestling fans around the world are still left stunned by how deep the corruption went. And up next we have Ric Flair tells Natalya to go and herself. This one is pretty self-explanatory, but the footage is from a WWE segment reportedly filmed for a live event or dark segment, where Flair is seen cutting a promo that quickly goes off the rails. And up next we have Shawn Michaels makes Vader cry. Shawn Michaels' backstage reputation in the 90s was anything but saintly. Known for his attitude and political pull, few were safe from his wrath. One of the most infamous examples of this came during Vader's short-lived WWE push. Vader was supposed to be a monster heel and was even planned to defeat Shawn Michaels for the title at the end of their program, but during one of their matches before the title change, things went south. At one point, Vader missed his cue in the ring, and Shawn very visibly screamed at him and even kicked him in the head mid-match, completely breaking character. But what happened backstage is what turned this into legend. Multiple wrestlers have confirmed that after the match, Shawn berated Vader backstage, calling him stiff, uncoordinated, and unsafe to work with. Reportedly, the verbal abuse was so intense that the 450-pound Vader, one of wrestling's most intimidating figures, broke down in tears. And up next we have the downfall of Ludwig Borger. Real name Tony Holm, Ludwig Borger was a Finnish powerhouse who made waves in WWE during the early 1990s. With his cold, nationalistic persona and intimidating frame, he was instantly positioned as a top heel, but once his wrestling days ended, Borger's life took a sharp and chaotic turn. In 2003, Holm entered Finnish politics and was surprisingly elected to parliament. However, his success was short-lived. Just 4 months after his election, Holm spiraled into a drug-fueled breakdown. After heavily drinking and consuming a cocktail of amphetamines, he got into a violent argument with his wife that lasted throughout the night. By 7 a.m., things hit a terrifying peak when Holm pulled out a gun and fired it, narrowly missing her. Neighbors hearing the chaos and gunshot called the police. A standoff then followed, and when police finally entered at 10 a.m., they found Holm unconscious and rushed him to the hospital. He then slipped into a coma that lasted 3 weeks, resulting in permanent brain damage. A search of his home uncovered a disturbing stash, an unlicensed firearm, thousands of pills, anabolic roids, and imported drugs. Holm was charged with multiple offenses, including firearm possession and drug-related crimes. Despite being a sitting member of parliament, he was sentenced to 4 months in prison. After this whole ordeal, he was still haunted by addiction and mental health issues. His demons never let go, and on January 8, 2010, Ludwig Borger died by at the age of 47. And up next we have WWF In Your House 8, Beware of the Dog, Blackout. WWF In Your House 8, Beware of the Dog was one of the strangest technical disasters in wrestling pay-per-view history. It was held in 1996 in Florence, South Carolina. The event was headlined by a WWF Championship match between Shawn Michaels and the British Bulldog, but the show is less remembered for the in-ring action, but more for the complete chaos. During the event, a massive power outage struck the arena, knocking out not just the building's lights, but also the pay-per-view feed. Despite the blackout, several matches still took place, in almost total darkness. WWE still managed to tape these matches in the dark, but fans in attendance could barely see what was happening and those watching at home missed it entirely. What's eerie is that some of the matches that happened during the blackout have never been released, not on DVD, not on the WWE network, not anywhere. Footage of the lights going out has surfaced online, but the 4 original matches remain locked away. And up next we have the Christian Blue Dot. This next entry sounds like a joke, but it's a truly bizarre idea that came straight from the top, Vince McMahon. Former WWE writer Alex Greenfield once recounted a surreal conversation with Vince McMahon during a flight to Sheffield, England. At the time, Christian was gaining momentum and was reportedly considered for a push toward the World Heavyweight Championship, but Vince had other thoughts. Vince allegedly said this: "I just don't like his face. It's not that he's ugly, it's just ratty." In the same breath, McMahon floated a wildly absurd idea, placing a blue dot over Christian's face on television every time he appeared. The inspiration? A 1990s media case involving a Kennedy family member accused of assault, where the accuser's face was censored on TV using a blue dot. That's what Vince McMahon wanted for Christian, a literal censor dot, permanently masking his face on broadcast. The idea never made it to air, but Greenfield swears it was pitched seriously during this flight. To this day, it remains one of the strangest almost happened stories in WWE lore. And up next we have Roddy Piper predicts his own death. In a chilling 2003 interview with HBO's Real Sports with Bryan's Gumball, Roddy Piper made a statement that would haunt fans for years to come. Reflecting on the toll that wrestling had taken on his body and mind, Piper solemnly declared that he doesn't think he's gonna make 65 because he's done too much. He spoke of painkillers, the grind of the road, and the emotional exhaustion of years spent living in the chaos of professional wrestling. It wasn't a dramatic statement, it was calm, resigned, and disturbingly matter-of-fact. 12 years later, Piper died in his sleep at a heart attack at the age of 61, just 4 years short of his own prophecy. Some fans believe Piper knew the damage was already done. Others point to an eerie accuracy of his words as a tragic reflection of how deeply the wrestling industry can wear down even its most resilient legends. And up next we have The Undertaker's Muslim conspiracy theory. This is one of the most strangest and persistent rumors in wrestling lore, the belief that The Undertaker secretly converted to Islam. In 2011, speculation exploded online after a photo surfaced of The Undertaker shaking hands with elderly Muslim passengers on a plane. The image went viral, with some fans claiming that he had not only converted to Islam, but had also taken on the name Muhammad Ishmael. At the same time, The Undertaker underwent a noticeable change in appearance, cutting his long hair and dressing more conservatively in public, which only added fuel to the fire. Despite there being no official statement or credible source confirming the rumor, the theory continues to circulate in some corners of the internet to this day. And up next we have Scott Hall kills a man. Before becoming a wrestling legend, Scott Hall was involved in an incident that would haunt him for the rest of his life. In 1983, while working as a bartender at a Florida nightclub, Hall got into an altercation with another man, allegedly over a woman. The argument spilled outside, where things turned deadly. According to Hall, the man pulled a gun on him during the confrontation. A struggle followed, and Hall managed to wrestle the weapon away. In the chaos, Hall then pulled the trigger, and the man that he was fighting died on the scene. Hall was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. However, due to insufficient physical evidence and conflicting witness testimonies, the charges were eventually dropped. Hall was never convicted, but he was never the same. Hall admitted in interviews that the event haunted him deeply. Though he walked free, the psychological scars remained. Many believe this moment marked the beginning of Hall's long public battle with addiction, depression, and inner demons.